Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamina Revolution, and all hell is breaking loose in the Middle East. Putin and Iran and the Assad militaries are wiping out the head choppers, but the media don't want to talk about it, the fake news. But before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, it looks very bad for the head choppers. You know, they done started something I don't think they can finish, and Putin has been deceived by Turkey. So Turkey might get something too. Let's get right into this show.
As you know, numerous terrorist groups supported by NATO countries, as well as Turkey and Israel, captured key cities in northern Syria during a lightning advance. We are talking about strategically important cities such as Sarakib and Aleppo, the second largest city in Syria. The capture of such a large city as Aleppo by terrorists has become a real disaster not only for the Syrian army, but also for the entire Middle East. The fact is that the arrival of pro-Turkish and pro-American terrorists in Aleppo has already forced hundreds of thousands of civilians to leave this city. Moreover, it is expected that in the coming days, the number of refugees in northern Syria may reach 3 million people. Many experts are confident that this humanitarian crisis will become much worse than what is currently happening in the Gaza Strip, where about 2 million Palestinians have become refugees due to the actions of the Israel Defense Forces. Commenting on the success of the terrorists in northern Syria, a commander in the so-called Jaish al-Isra rebel brigade, Mustafa Abdul Jaber, officially admitted that his fighters had achieved such impressive successes due to the lack of Iran-backed manpower in the province of Aleppo. According to him, since October 2023, pro-Iranian armed groups have suffered serious losses during the confrontation with Israel. Moreover, Mustafa Abdul Jaber also said that regular airstrikes by the Israeli Air Force against positions of pro-Iranian armed groups in Syria also became one of the main reasons for such a rapid retreat of the Syrian army in Aleppo province. Well, my dear truth seekers, as you can see, this pro-Turkish field commander did not say anything new with his statement. Even without his words, we all know perfectly well who exactly is behind this new escalation in Syria. As I said earlier, the United States, NATO, Turkey, and Israel have chosen the perfect moment to attack Syria. The fact is that Russia is waging a full-scale war against NATO on the territory of Ukraine, while Lebanese Hezbollah and Iran are in a state of war with Tel Aviv. All this created the ideal ground for Moscow's enemies to open a second front against Russia. Vladimir Putin's main mistake was that he was confident that the city of Aleppo and other strategically important settlements in northern Syria were under the powerful protection of pro-Iranian armed formations. Moreover, the Russian leader was also confident that his so-called friend, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, would keep his promise and continue to control the so-called Idlib de-escalation center, preventing pro-Turkish terrorists from attacking the positions of the Syrian army. Let me remind you that in December 2016, after the Syrian army, with the support of Russian combat aviation and PMC Wagner Group, liberated the city of Aleppo, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urgently flew to Moscow and met with Putin. At this meeting, the Turkish leader asked Putin not to liberate the city of Idlib, promising that pro-Turkish militants would not attack the Syrian army. Back then, in order not to spoil relations with Turkey, Vladimir Putin agreed not to liberate the city of Idlib, in return for security guarantees from Erdogan. And as recent events have shown, this has become Putin's big strategic mistake. Now, 8 years later, Putin has finally made sure that all the promises and security guarantees from the president of a country that is a member of NATO are worthless. By the way, now the West offers similar security guarantees regarding the Ukrainian issue. At the moment, the West is again trying to convince Vladimir Putin to stop the offensive and not to touch the remaining cities, but this time in Ukraine. Erdogan's betrayal and the seizure by pro-Turkish and pro-American terrorists of cities such as Aleppo and Sarikib once again proved that Russia should not conclude any agreements with the West and its vassals. I am absolutely sure that if Vladimir Putin believes the West and agrees to freeze the conflict in Ukraine, as he once did in Syria, then in 10 years, the West will try to take revenge for its defeat, as a result of which American ballistic and cruise missiles will fly again in the skies over Crimea and Kursk. Against this backdrop, I hope that Vladimir Putin will finally stop believing the promises of Western leaders and sign all sorts of agreements with such two-headed snakes as Recep Tayyip Erdogan. My friends, you must finally understand that what is happening now in Syria has once again proved that every war must be brought to a logical end. You must finally understand that freezing of conflicts will not bring the long-awaited peace. Only the complete destruction of the enemy army and the unconditional surrender of the enemy forces leaders can bring long-term peace. And judging by the incoming information from Syria, Vladimir Putin finally realized that the West and its vassals should no longer be trusted. So, insiders in Syria confirmed that Moscow promised Damascus full military support against the backdrop of a new offensive by pro-Turkish and pro-American terrorists. Moreover, while other Syrian allies are making phone calls to Assad and just paid lip service to Damascus, Russian combat aviation has already launched a full-scale attack on terrorists along the entire combat contact line.
Russia been going berserk.
It is reported that in the last 48 hours alone, Russian Su-34, Su-24, and Su-30 combat planes have carried out more than 100 airstrikes on terrorist positions. It is reported that as a result of these actions, Russian combat aviation destroyed more than 1,000 terrorists and about 20 field commanders, among whom were also active duty officers of the Turkish and Ukrainian armies.
They can't take a month of this type of butt kicking Russia giving them right now. See, Putin took the gloves off. He ain't finna play with these people, all the Americans, all NATO. He already been warning them.
Moreover, the active support of Russian combat aviation allowed the Syrian army to build a powerful line of defense in the Hama area and transfer additional forces to the city. It is reported that as of December 2, 2024, the Syrian army managed not only to stop the advance of terrorists, but also to go on the offensive north of Hama, as a result of which several settlements were liberated. Against this backdrop, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad finally made the first official statement regarding the situation in the country. In particular, he said that Syria, with the help of its friends and allies, will destroy all terrorists and defend its territorial integrity. Meanwhile, judging by the actions of Russian combat aviation, it becomes clear that the Russian command is trying not only to stop the advance of terrorists, but also to create an effective line of resistance that will extend to Aleppo itself, where Kurdish formations continue to hold part of the city, providing fierce resistance to pro-Turkish militants. Amid all this, many experts expressed confidence that this time, after the liberation of Aleppo, Putin will not stop and severely punish Erdogan. According to them, the Russian president will most likely also liberate Idlib, destroying all pro-Turkish militants in this city, which will be a demonstrative punishment of the Turkish leader.
Several headquarters and equipment of foreign militias in Idlib were the target of the most ferocious Syrian-Russian airstrikes. The targets were destroyed by fire due to the most powerful explosions. In recent days, aviations have been working day and night at full speed, replacing each other in the air, since the foreigners released the multinational terrorist forces that moved from Idlib to Aleppo and then to Hama. CCTV footage shows the moment on the night of November 30, 2024 at 11 local time. The temporary command and operation center of the al-Qaeda terror militia renamed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS, or possibly other militia units there, was hit hard with a tremendous explosion. As a result of the warplanes increasing their airstrikes, according to reports, many militia members and Turkish mercenaries are estimated to have been killed. In addition, the Syrian Ministry of Defense also reported that the combined Syrian-Russian airstrikes were concentrated, targeting a convoy of al-Nusra militias transporting a large amount of ammunition in the eastern Idlib countryside. The warplanes targeted a convoy consisting of dozens of vehicles and vehicles carrying ammunition, equipment, fuel, and others. According to other sources, the element was transferred from the Turkish army, then intercepted and destroyed. The sound of a secondary explosion is heard in the video, which caused its complete destruction and killed many militants. Morning report on December 2 of the Russian Reconciliation Center in Syria. The Syrian army, with the help of the Russian aerospace forces, eliminated 320 militants and 63 pieces of equipment from Idlib in the fight against terrorism. Russian aviation is increasingly intensively moving, considering that such work for several years has supported Syria in confronting foreign extremism and terrorism, which is setting a storm in the Middle East. The Syrian army began launching Tochka missiles, and the consequences of its arrival in one of the headquarters and operations of the al-Qaeda affiliated organization, Jabhat al-Nusra, in Idlib, with devastating results. The scenes published on December 1, 2024 by the
Big boy
Syrian Gulf
Wars,
Army
big boy
SAA
toys.
showed that they began using various heavy weapons, not only the M600 Tishreen tactical ballistic missiles, but in particular now for the first time deploying the OTR-21 Tochka-U tactical missile, which can carry a 420 kilograms warhead.
They can't stop that.
In just a matter of days, the front line reached a dangerous level for the militia units, they entering Syria suddenly but miscalculated. This version has a range of 120 kilometers and high accuracy, fired by the Syrian army with targeted attacks on several militia command rooms, supported by Turkey and the West. The scene in the city of Idlib from the footage of the militia shows the consequences of the Soviet Tochka missile hit, reaching a very severe level of damage to enemy targets. One of the gathering points of the terrorist militias Jabhat al-Nusra or the command headquarters of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS, as reported by other sources,
It's only the
was
beginning.
covered in dust and thick smoke, destroying several vehicles in the area around the militia leadership center, after a wave of precision strikes by the Tochka missiles of the Assad government forces. In this attack, at least 65 militias were reported killed, but it is likely more considering the damage caused by the missiles. It is noteworthy, the pro-militia media and their supporters are now starting to shout that the Syrian operations together with Russia are starting to have a severe impact on civilians, something that is repeated and unproven. The Syrian government will take unprecedented measures to suppress terrorism that is considered to only understand the language of violence and destroy it quickly, as Assad previously said. It seems that the Syrian army is operating hundreds of missiles from this system during this period, and its launches continue to destroy foreign militias with one goal: to occupy Syria.
JudgeNap.com. Ray is 007. Does the United States take Russia seriously, whether before or after the Oreshnik missile was fired?
Well, before is easy. The answer is no. The United States, such as it is, with Blinken and Sullivan running the show, have not taken Russia seriously. Question is, what will they do now?
Right.
Many times in the past, Putin has said, will you listen now? Now, will you listen? Well, at Astana, I heard this sort of an astonishing Astana speech last Thursday, where he, very, very deliberately went through the details of this new missile, the Oreshnik, okay? And let me just cite a couple of sentences because it's really quite germane here.
Please
The
do.
Oreshnik system has no equivalence in the world. The system deploys dozens of homing warheads that strike the target at a velocity of Mach 10. The temperature of the impact elements reaches 4,000 degrees Celsius, okay? Consequently, everything within reach, the explosion's epicenter, is reduced to elementary particles, turning everything into dust. Okay, the missile is capable of destroying even heavily fortified structures and those located at significant depths where Zelensky is hiding now. Lastly, but not leastly, the Ministry of Defense, says Putin, and the General Staff of the Russian Army are currently identifying targets for strikes within Ukraine. This may include military installations, defense industry sites, or decision-making centers in Kiev, all the more so since the Kiev regime has repeatedly attacked us again with these longer-range missiles. So the Russians are feeling pretty smug about all this. The TV programs last night, my friend Gil Doktorov tells me, the question was, what should the Russians do now with respect to the West? And the answer was, hands up, hands up. Now, what's going to happen? Well, the key here is that more Ukrainian installations are going to be struck, and not necessarily NATO ones, although there are NATO officers, as we know, at many of these installations within Ukraine. The die is cast. Putin is not kidding around. The question as to whether Sullivan and Blinken will listen now, I still don't know, Judge, but hopefully they will listen.
I mean, will General Keith Kellogg, who's President-elect Trump's emissary, and was talking over the weekend on Fox about defeating Russians, will he listen? Will Mike Waltz, who is President-elect Trump's national security advisor and made similar comments 10 days ago, will he listen? Does
Well,
American intel know the power and strength of Oreshnik? Can it
the
verify and confirm what President Putin said the weapon can do?
the answer is yes, and as you know, Ted Postal has pretty much verified that from a physics point of view. You mentioned Kellogg. Months ago, there was this Kellogg Fred Flight's proposal, which actually makes a little bit of sense. In other words, if Kellogg and Flights are permitted by Trump to go down this road, there's not an awful lot of distance between a ban on Ukrainian entry into NATO forever or for 10, 20 years or something like that. That can be talked about. I don't think the Russians are going to give up on that easily. But, the other things are, it's a sensible and realistic starting point. I made some notes on it here. Putin's terms in June of 2024, this year, well, it's not an ultimatum. They don't care about territory. And most of all, in my view, if you believe what Biden said and Blinken and Sullivan that the Russians are going to go into Poland and the Baltic states, well, here's a golden opportunity for Trump to say, okay, I got the Russians to agree not to attack Poland, not to attack the Baltic states, actually, not even to go west of the Dnieper River. How about that? He could say that with everybody believing that earlier Russia had that intent.
Do the American neocons, whether it's General Kellogg or Mike Waltz, whether it's Tony Blinken on his way out or Jake Sullivan on its way out, whether it's Joe Biden, probably doesn't have serious thoughts about this any longer, or Donald Trump, do they really believe that Iran is a serious threat to the national security of the United States of America? Do they honestly believe that?
No, this is all Israeli fairy tales, and our position on this is dictated solely by Israel. I want to say a word about Kellogg. Now, I like the fact that he's almost as old as me, Judge. Right? that that means he fought in Vietnam. All right, he knows a little bit about what war is like. Unlike these Austins and these other prima donnas that have bubbled to the top of the Pentagon. Okay, so I have some hope that if he's given his head with the Flight's Kellogg proposal, there's room to negotiate there. It would be different if the Russians really wanted to go and take over all Ukraine. They don't. If they wanted to take both, but they don't. Okay, they already indicated back in April of 2022 they would settle for a lot less than they occupy now, as long as Ukraine didn't try to get into NATO anymore. That's the big road.
Does General Kellogg understand that?
Oh, I believe he does. Yeah, and Fred Fleitz, his right-hand person, does. I mean, these people are pretty smart people. And as I say, it all depends on whether Trump is adroit enough to say, well, all right, I can play this game. I can rhetorically say, we won. We prevented Putin from going to Poland and the Baltic states. It's kind of a no-brainer from a rhetorical point of view. And Putin doesn't want to go, I believe Putin doesn't want to go any farther than the Dnieper River. And then there's the makings of a deal so long as Russia's security is ensured, which has not been the case for the last decade.
What is the state of affairs in Syria today, and what is the Russian-Syrian connection?
Well, Judge, it's really interesting. We decided after we got bogged down in Iraq, and after we messed up Libya forever, and we said, oh, next on the next on the neocon list would be Syria. Now they had that revolution in 2011. We took advantage of that. That's we, Western intelligence services, and we cultivated moderate rebels. Moderate rebels. They used to be called Al Qaeda or Al Nusra. Now they're called, I wrote it down here, Hayat Tahrir al Sham or HTS, sort of an inversion of Harry Truman, not HST,
Right.
HTS, okay? So it's the same group, okay? Now they've been trained and they're just supported by the US. Matter of fact, there was this really embarrassing situation where General Lloyd Austin, at the time head of CENTCOM, was asked to testify to what happened to that $500 million that we invested in training these moderate rebels to do our bidding in Syria. He testified before Congress. I don't know if you have that clip or not,
We do.
but
We do have the clip. Let's run it, and then
yeah,
you can comment on it. What he says is
Nah, they
truly
trained the
absurd,
terrorists.
and the absurdity of it was called out by then, I believe, Senator Ayotte of
that's
New
right.
Hampshire. But here's a clip from 2015. It's the same Lloyd Austin, but he's a four-star general, and he's wearing his dress blues.
It's a small number, and the ones that are in the fight is we're talking four or five.
As I see it right now, this 4 or 5 U.S. trained fighters, let's not kid ourselves, that's a joke.
So the United States of America, through the military and the CIA and other means, spent $500 million to train 4 or 5 people. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Now imagine the absurdity. They say they spent $500 million and they trained 4 or 5 soldiers. You heard they said that in a congressional meeting. They're lying. They trained ISIS and Al Qaeda with that money. They said, no, we didn't train them. We trained other soldiers, and then they turned on us and they became ISIS and Al Qaeda. But we have 4 or 5 good soldiers who stayed on our side. What kind of BS are y'all trying to pull here?
I mean, this is sworn testimony before Congress. I was struck at the time that he didn't seem to be embarrassed. The attitude is vis-a-vis Congress, the Pentagon. So what are you going to do about it? Yeah, you gave us $500 million. Well, we have 4 or 5 moderate rebels still in the fight. What are you going to do about it? So it's complete disdain for Congress's oversight duties. Nothing happened. Kelly Ayotte, she didn't follow through, and Austin, as a reward, became Secretary of Defense. My God.
And obviously, nobody from the CIA was interrogated. You can't look up how the $500 million was spent, even though the Constitution says no money shall be spent from the public treasury except that which is recorded in a public journal. Where is that public journal, Ray?
Well, it was earmarked for this express purpose, overtly, publicly, okay? One of the other things in that one clip, which wasn't included, is the acknowledgement that Austin's intelligence at CENTCOM was being investigated by the Pentagon Inspector General because more than 50 analysts said he was bending the intelligence to make it seem good for the president, which he was, okay? The Pentagon investigation went for 2 years and then eventually it ended up in nothing. But and then it's really, really interesting how Lloyd Austin just was left right off the hook. No holding him responsible. And of course you see him on duty now as Secretary of Defense.
Bring us up to date, please, on the latest happenings in Syria involving Iran, involving Russia, involving the United States, and involving the Israelis.
Well, it's quite a mix. What we have is right after the truce or ceasefire, whatever you want to call it, between Lebanon and Israel. I'm not quite sure that Hezbollah agreed to it. Then we had this massive use of these same moderate rebels who are not moderate by any stretch of the imagination. They're trained by Western security sources, and they made a big offensive against Aleppo. Okay, they seized most of the city. It was a shock because the Syrian troops there are mostly conscript. They didn't expect, they were taken by surprise. It was a little embarrassing. However, the Russians are in the fray. They entered in 2015. Putin pulled Obama aside at the UN on the 29th of September 2015 and said, look, we don't buy the notion there are moderate rebels, okay? We're going into Syria with our own armed forces, with our own aircraft. Why don't I suggest that you have my foreign minister Lavrov talk with John Kerry, your Secretary of State, see if we can deconflict things so that we don't shoot each other down in the air. And they worked 11 months to get a ceasefire. The ceasefire was ad referendum to Putin and to Obama. They both blessed it, okay? And then 9 days later, the U.S. Air Force bombed fixed Syrian army positions. End of ceasefire. It was the U.S. Air Force that was running things in those days, and Kerry pretty much admitted it. It was pitiful performance on the part of Kerry. He confessed later that this was the most confusing complex of issues that he ever dealt with in his public life. And so in the interview, I said, well, why do you think you could get a ceasefire? He said, well, I thought we could align the forces the way we want, but we couldn't do it. Hello, another manifestation of this exceptionalism where we can align the terribly complicated forces. And Kerry had enough memory to memorize these forces, about 7 of them, and to say, in the end, I failed in trying to align, that's the word he used, align these forces. So now they're back at it, and they're trying to prevent any arms getting in through Syria into Hezbollah. But it's very, very dicey, and I think my guess would be that between Russian bombing and a reconstituted front by the Syrian army, these people will be dealt with. Will take a while, but they will be dealt with, and Hezbollah will still get enough arms to keep doing what it has been doing.
Add to this mix Turkey.
Well, Turkey is, the Russians are just perplexed. So, Turkey is doing this for its own purposes, of course, but it's a major player here. They have a Kurdish problem, okay? And they don't want any Kurdish republic or any Kurdish groups gaining strength in southern Turkey. And so turn them into Syria. Let the refugees go back into Syria. It's really so cynical that it's worthy of a Blinken or a Sullivan sort of operation. But Erdogan is in trouble deep now with the Russians and with other people who thought that Bashar al-Assad was safe for a while. I still think he's safe, but it's going to take another struggle to get these folks out of Idlib and out of Aleppo.
So Turkey is either in BRICS or has made an application to join BRICS. Is it actively, aggressively fighting against Russian military forces on the ground or in the sky over Syria?
Yeah, I would say their chances are much less given what Erdogan has done over the weekend and last few days.
Say again?
Their chances are much less of getting into BRICS, Turkey.
Right.
I think the Chinese are also up in arms.
I guess.
Hell no, they not
when I
getting
ask
now.
this question to our dear friend and colleague Larry Johnson, he'll say, "Hey, Judge, can you spell OIL?"
That's part of it. It's more a strategic thing, in my view, with Israel really wanting a safe space in Syria. And, way back when, back in 2013, after Putin had pulled Obama's chestnuts out of the fire, allowing a situation where Obama would not have to make overt war on Syria, well, they were kind of up in arms, and they were just distraught because they were deprived of their war. Now, at that time, the New York Times bureau chief in Jerusalem talked to top level Israeli officials. He said, "What's your preferred outcome in Syria?" And some of them said, one of them said, he was a previous consul general in New York. He said, look, Jody, it's a little embarrassing to say this, but our preferred outcome in Syria is no outcome. As long as the Sunni and Shia are drawing blood from each other, that's just fine. It doesn't look pretty, but as long as they're doing that, Israel has no problems with Syria. Chaos is what we want. Now, that made the front page of the New York Times lead article on the 6th of September 2013. Look it up. All the censors must have been out in East Hampton sipping martinis or so over the Labor Day weekend, but it got in there. Look it up. It's an amazing sort of admission by the Israelis that look, we want Bedlam in Syria. That makes us feel secure.
Is there adversity today between President Assad's government and Prime Minister Netanyahu's government, or is it the Israeli perception or propaganda that Assad is arming Hezbollah?
No, Assad has, well, Hezbollah bailed Assad out about a decade ago.
Right.
I mean, the Alawites and the Shia are very close. Some of them think them identical. So yeah, I mean, Netanyahu fears this, but Assad is playing defense now, and he's had to play defense ever since 2011, when the U.S. started their covert operations there, and in 2013 they had Obama mousetrapped by a false flag chemical attack outside of Damascus. They thought they had a mousetrap into an overt war against Syria. And I tell you, Judge, I was at the top of the CNN building when all this went down. And I opened the door and knocked over this little fellow. His name was Paul Wolfowitz. And next to him was Joe Lieberman. It looked like a funeral. It had just been announced. Just been announced. No need for a war. No, really. They had no pastel ties. These were black ties, and they were all very morose. And they said, "Oh my God, oh no, we're not getting a war." This was neocondom right there. I had an interview with BBC earlier on, and they didn't notice me staying on here, but it was really quite revealing how irate they were in not being able to get their overt war on Syria. Obama wasn't strong enough to close down the covert war, which also cost billions of dollars.
Where is the CIA and where is MI6 in Syria today? Not physically where, but where in this conflagration?
Well, it doesn't really matter. They both follow instructions from the government. The instructions are support Netanyahu at all costs. We got to make sure that the world is safe for Netanyahu. And with the Biden administration going out on January 20th, they want to leave a legacy where they have gone the last mile, not only for Netanyahu, but for Ukraine as well. And there's a lot of mischief there. I think both Russia and the Syrians are wise enough, having been through this before, to hold their serious fire and see what happens when Trump comes in.
And see what happens when Trump comes in. Ray McGovern, thank you, my dear friend. Great.
You're most welcome, Judge.
Great analysis. Seriously before Oreshnik. Does the United States take Russia seriously after Oreshnik?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think what we're seeing in Syria is an extension of that failure to take Russia seriously. The perception I think that is held currently within the intelligence community, certainly held within the policy community is that Russia's weak, that Russia's on the verge of collapse, that all we need to do is keep applying pressure and Russia's going to crack. Uh, and so that perception then leads to the kinds of actions that we've seen the United States take, such as, authorizing Ukraine to fire these short-range missiles farther into Russia to attack Russian territory, as well as talk about deploying uh, both NATO and U.S. forces into Ukraine. So this is, I think there's still a failure to appreciate what Russia has become. Russia is once again a superpower by every definition, and militarily, it is superior to the United States, at least with respect to land forces. In terms of air force, it can hold its own. On the submarine side, it's probably superior. Uh, Naval surface fleets, Russia doesn't have as much as the United States because that has been a critical part of the U.S. Military strategy, so-called strategy. But those systems are now outdated. They're extremely vulnerable to hypersonic missiles.
Did the U.S. intelligence know about Oreshnik before it was fired? Did they know that it turns whatever it hits into 4,000 degrees centigrade? Were they familiar with its descriptive characteristics as outlined by President Putin over the weekend?
I don't know. Based upon what I've seen in the past with other systems, where you've got some very good analysts, but they'll be limited to trying to draw conclusions based upon overhead imagery taken by satellites, any intercepted electronic signals, whether communication or otherwise, what's known as ELINT, and they could draw some suppositions, some speculative conclusions. What'd be interesting to know is, did any of them come close to getting it right, or were they, thoroughly, completely surprised? What what we do know is that when Donald Trump walked away from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement, the INF agreement in 2018, that Russia started working on intermediate range nuclear missiles. The U.S. intelligence community should have, I can't guarantee that they did, but they should have had that as what's called a collection priority. Believe it or not, every year they'd come around and ask analysts to draw up the list of what do we need to collect on. And then they'd actually put together a list of collection requirements. And then those requirements are sent out to the intelligence collectors. So, for example, the CIA chief of station, he would have 5 or 6 different things that would be identified as what he or she needed to collect on. And if they didn't collect on it, they got marked down in their evaluation. The same thing for the National Security Agency, the same thing for the National Reconnaissance Office, that you go for according to these collection priorities. So I can't even assure you that it was on the collection priority list. It should have been, but we don't know.
Has the United States developed a comparable weapon?
No. I can't tell you how I know that, but just let me say that no, we haven't. But there've been I was, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, Larry, and I appreciate the confidentiality of sources as well. Switching gears slightly, do the neocons truly and sincerely believe that Iran is a threat to the national security of the United States, or are they just going along with this because that's what Netanyahu's been preaching?
Well, that's their story, and that it is. We have been in the United States repeatedly told that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. That Iran is the problem. If How do you measure terrorism? Well, you measure terrorism by number of attacks. The label slapped on Iran comes principally because of its support for Hamas and Hezbollah. And that's why I went to some lengths to look into the actual terrorist attacks in Israel, looking at the data collected not by Larry Johnson, not even by the US government, collected by the Israeli government. It was published on the foreign ministry site, which lists every single Palestinian attack. And remember, these are the Palestinians who are backed by Iran from August of 2000 up through current day. And I was really shocked to discover that over the course of that 24 years, there were only 104 attacks attributed to Hamas. Now, you compare that to attacks that are linked to ISIS in just 1 year, over 500 attacks by ISIS in 1 year. And when you go to the U.S. State Department's list of annual report, country reports on terrorism, they list out the top 10 groups every year. The last report came out, it was published last year, 2023. It covered the year 2022. So the State Department's lagging behind what it should be doing. The report for last year should be out. But anyway, the report for 2022 showed that the top 10 groups, not a single one of them was paid for, sponsored by, trained by Iran, not one. So this it's a lie that Iran's the number one sponsor of terrorism. And then what the United States needs to take responsibility for is the fact we have been conducting and supporting terrorist attacks inside Iran. You know, after 9/11, we made a big weepy deal about, oh, we're against terrorism. We're going to take this global war on terrorism. And yet in the ensuing years, we've been supporting terrorist attacks inside Iran, including the murders of nuclear scientists, civilians, because we say, oh, they're a threat, so we're going to kill them, as well as supporting groups like the Mujahideen al-Khalq, the MEK. They are been carrying out terrorist attacks throughout Iran. So our hands are certainly dirty there. And then when we get into Syria, we have been providing weapons, sometimes indirectly, to Islamic extremists, jihadis, the very type that we accuse of blowing up, flying planes into the World Trade Center. So that's why I say this portrayal of Iran is the great Satan for us, because they call us the great Satan, and frankly, with good reason. Our hands are not clean when it comes to Iran. We have a long, long history of meddling.
I'm going to ask you about what's going on in Syria in a minute, but your terrific description of America supporting the worst type of terrorist groups reminds me, and I'm not a fan of Churchill, of that one-liner of his. There are no lasting friendships. There are no lasting enmities. There are only lasting interests. But he was right, and and what you've just described is an example of that. What is going on in Syria today? Can you even tell us who's fighting whom?
The West is trying to destroy Syria, and the West is using Turkey and this radical Islamic sect known as HTS as a proxy. But let's remember this goes back years. In 2011, the United States, during the so-called Arab Spring, with the backing of Gulf Arabs, targeted Syria specifically to try to take out Bashar al-Assad. Why? Because Assad was seen as too closely aligned with Iran. This was a way to attack and weaken Iran. And that attack was entirely to serve Israel's interests, to get rid of Iran, because it's Israel that views Iran as the ultimate threat in the region. And perhaps with good reason, but Iran is fighting on behalf of the Palestinian people, and Israel is committing genocide on the Palestinian people. So you go back to 2011 when the United States started collecting weapons in Libya, collecting those, putting them in Benghazi, servicing those weapons, and those weapons were shipped out of Benghazi.
Yeah, there's an old familiar. There's an old familiar word, Mrs. Clinton.
Yeah. And those weapons were shipped to Turkey. We were coordinating with Turkey back then, and then Turkey would take those weapons and deliver them to these radical Sunni extremists that Alistair Kirk talked about earlier on your show. They're called takfiri, which means they're the ultimate apostates. They hate everybody. They hate Sunnis, they hate Shias, because they think they're the only truth bearers for Allah. And so they'll go out and kill everybody. So that's what the Turks were doing. In fact, the attack in Benghazi that took place in 2012 occurred because a week before that attack, David Petraeus, CIA director, flew to Turkey and he said, "Hey guys, we're going to have to suspend this weapons shipment for a bit. Barack Obama's worried that it could impact on his election because the campaign was heating up, and so we're going to put a halt to that." Chris Stevens, the ambassador, went to Benghazi specifically to meet with the Turkish counterpart from their embassy in order to, finish the arrangements on that. And that's when that attack took place. So now what's happened is, in part, the United States and the Great Britain, I believe, have created this with Turkey's full cooperation and participation. It now is clear. This offensive that coincided with this imposition of the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. And by this pressure to try to destroy the government of Bashar al-Assad, and at the same time force the Russians to flood troops into the region as well, because again, remember, the British and American intelligence believe that if they can put this kind of strain on Russia, it'll take some of the heat off in Ukraine. They don't understand Russia's got 1.5 million soldiers. Russia has ample reserves. Russia can actually walk and chew gum at the same time, unlike the United States, unlike Great Britain.
Isn't Ukraine effectively over, or do these madmen still think? And I got to tell you, I heard General Kellogg over the weekend. I don't know if you know him. You certainly know of him. Make some comments about the need to resist Russian aggression in Ukraine. Similar comments to what Mike Waltz said 2 weeks ago. Are these people delusional?
Yes, in short. It goes back to what's called confirmation
Larry,
bias.
this is supposed to be a new team from a peace president, and it sounds like it's the same mentality as Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan.
Yeah, if you voted for chocolate ice cream, you're getting vanilla. So they haven't changed at all. And part of it, again, it goes back to what people believe about the situation. They believe that Russia's an authoritarian state. And Judge, let me emphasize in this, the way this is presented to the average person, not just in the United States, but around the world, this is sold as some sort of struggle for freedom. This is based in some sort of ideology. We're here for freedom and democracy. And that's a bunch of crap. That's a lie. This is about money. This is about the United States, for example, getting rid of the Nord Stream pipeline so Europe has to buy our natural gas. They don't want Russia selling that cheap natural gas to them because that hurts our ability to make money. Why do we want Russia? Russia's got all these natural resources. They shouldn't have all those. How about Syria? Well, Syria's got plans in place that there were going to be, there's hopes to build 2 pipelines. One pipeline would come out of Iran, go across Iraq through Syria, and then have an oil terminal there in Syria where oil could be picked up from the Mediterranean and shipped all over. Oh, the West can't have that. So that's why we're busy trying to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Get him out of the way so we can get a friendly ruler in there. And then guess what? This oil pipeline will come out of Qatar. It'll go up through Saudi Arabia. It'll cross Jordan. It'll then go through Syria. And gee, where does it end up? Oh my God, it'll end up in Turkey. And so Turkey winds up being the economic benefactor at that. That's what this is all about. This is about money. This isn't about Islam versus Christianity. This isn't about freedom versus authoritarianism. Those are all deep state lies. It is the money. Follow the money.
Is there any connection between the description you just gave and President Trump's murder of General Soleimani during his first term?
Yeah, I think so. I kept hearing about, oh man, Soleimani is such a bad guy. Look, Soleimani was a general, and the thing we don't like to admit when it comes to Iran and so-called Iran involvement with terrorism is Iran's been attacking almost exclusively military targets over its history of so-called terrorism. We say, oh, their terrorist attack against the Marine barracks. Well, guess what? Military target. We had Marines there, they get guns. I don't put that in the same category as some suicide bomber that walks into a cafe where you got, a lot of civilians just eating, trying to have lunch and blowing himself up. That, I think, is the actual definition of terrorism, the use of violence against civilians for political means. But when you're using violence against soldiers for political means, you know what? Let me think. There's a three-letter word. Oh yeah, that's called war.
Right.
All right. And let's stop. But what we've got away with in the United States now is we like to label everything terrorism, so that way we can take away our civil rights. Because if it's a terrorist threat, then there is no due process. Then there is no constitution. Then we have the right to spy on you. Then we have the right to intercept your phone calls. We have the right to read your mail. You have no privacy because that terrorist threat's out there. It's a pesky thing, and we got to stop it. Sorry, you got me wound up today.
No, I'm glad I got you wound up. This will wind you up even more. I think you'll probably remember Mrs. Clinton's famous "So what?"
But what was going on and why they were doing what they were
No,
doing?
no, no, no. Again, we were
no.
misled that there were supposedly protests and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact.
But
and the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Well, I'll tell you what difference it makes. The difference makes it was her decision in part. She was part of the decision to send Chris Stevens there. Hey, go talk to the Turkish consul general and inform him that we're cutting off all further movement of weapons out of Benghazi. And those weapons are no longer going to go to these Islamic groups. Well, guess what? Those Islamic groups got a little upset that they were being cut off. And that was one of the reasons they attacked that so-called consulate. It wasn't a consulate, it was a CIA base. And the CIA base had over 25 CIA officers along with contractors, which is a very, very large entity. If you go through Africa, you'd find, probably the average CIA station, supposed to be the main site, would be lucky to have 5 or 6 people. So this was a big operation, and it was completely tied into this covert action that had been started with Hillary Clinton's knowledge and participation. And one more thing, a good friend of mine, Mark Thompson, who was the deputy assistant secretary in the Bureau of Counterterrorism back then. So he was in charge of military affairs. And he's the one that's supposed to be coordinating with the special operations forces and the Pentagon if there is going to be any kind of U.S. government response to a terrorist incident overseas. So he's sitting at his desk and he gets a call from the Delta Force guys down at Fort Bragg. And they're going, "Hey, Mark, listen, wanted to coordinate with you. We're getting spun up to go to Benghazi." And he goes, "Benghazi, why?" And they go, "Well, haven't you heard?" He goes, "No." So Mark gets on the phone, calls the ops center, because the ops center should have notified him. Officer in the operations center said, "Secretary Clinton told us not to inform you." Okay?
Wow.
That's the kind of despicable human being Hillary Clinton is. And I'm sorry to say, I thought she was once qualified to be president. So people can call my judgment question my judgment on a variety of things.
You're so refreshingly candid, but you're also so informative, Larry, even if it causes you to second guess your own opinion of people. And we all do that all the time. Ray McGovern sent us a fascinating clip. This will raise your blood pressure even more. This is 9 years ago. The clip is of then General Lloyd Austin defending the expenditure of $500 million to train anti-Assad Syrian fighters. And guess how many fighters they trained for $500 million? Watch this interrogation by then Senator Kelly Ayotte.
It's a
This
small
is a
number.
scam. They
And,
train ISIS.
The ones that are in the fight is we're talking four or five.
As I see it right now, this 4 or 5 US trained fighters, let's not kid ourselves, that's a joke.
And as Ray points out, did you see any apology or any shame or any hesitation on his face? No. We spent $500 million training 4 or 5 people. Big deal.
Well, a lot of that money went into the pockets of Turkish military, Turkish intelligence, and President Erdogan and his family, I'm sure, got a taste. One of the real problems here is Tayyip Erdogan, and he's actually
That's crazy, bro.
Foolishly.
They feel like the American population are suckers. They took $500 million for us and said they trained 5 soldiers. They lie. They trained ISIS and Al Qaeda with that money, and then pocketed the rest.
Casting his lot now with the United States, with Great Britain, in this bid to destroy Syria. I think he's probably ended up destroying himself, because unlike what happened in 2011, 2012, when that war kicked up against Bashar al-Assad, Assad was all alone with the exception of some support from Iran for about 3 years until Russia intervened. And during that entire time, he was standing against all the Gulf Arabs, the Gulf states, and Jordan and Egypt. They all came out and condemned Assad, and they threw him out of the Arab League. Now, over the course of the last year, Assad is back in the Arab League, and just this week, the Arab League announced, we're standing with Assad. So you got this now growing divide. The divide is increasing between the United States, the hegemon, and NATO, and the global South. That's opening up. That's not closing. They're beginning to see now more clearly that the West has zero interest in working with these people in any kind of honest way. And in fact, because the West plan is, it's either we're going to sanction you, we're going to run a color revolution to overthrow you, or we're going to invade you. That's it. That's our 3-point plan. There's no diplomacy. There's no friendship. There's no mutual understanding. It's got to be our way or the highway for you.
What a strange character Erdogan is. Is he still trying to join BRICS while he's doing this?
Yeah, I think he's now, his invitation to BRICS will be rescinded. Until Turkey has a change in leadership. And I wouldn't be surprised that this is certainly damaged. He's already betrayed Vladimir Putin a couple of times, and I think Putin may have reached his limit with this character now. To call Erdogan a scoundrel would be an insult to scoundrels all around the world.
Larry Johnson, thank you very much, my dear friend. Great
We have to see, but I mean, previous threats to Israel were Iraq, Libya, Syria. These were all listed some time ago in a clean break strategy that was, I think, put up by Richard Pearl and others of the neocons in '96, and it suggested that 4 states needed to be regime changed. And the last one was Iran, but it included, of course, Syria and Lebanon, and all of these countries had to be overthrown. Many of them partly because, in Wolfowitz's view, they were quite close to Russia, and he wanted Russia out of the Middle East completely. Well, obviously that hasn't worked because Russia is very much, again, in the Middle East. So, but that was the original plan, to go and to remove all the obstacles to Israeli primacy, not the same as United States primacy, but Israeli primacy. Of course, Israel would do many things that America wanted it to do, but Israeli primacy, Israeli interests are not quite the same as American interests in the region. And indeed, America's had to pay a price for this, quite a heavy price in terms of its interests of, if you like, making these Netanyahu wars in the region.
Is the West still determined to put missiles on Russian borders wherever they can, notwithstanding the lesson of Ukraine? Or does the West not even perceive the lesson of Ukraine?
I mean, I think basically, I mean, Ukraine is part of this, but the basic element of it is much more straightforward. It is that the United States and the security establishment is not prepared to allow the heartland of Asia, what Mackinder in the 19th century said, who controls East Europe controls the heartland, and who controls the heartland? That's the whole area going over to China. Huge area, Siberia, right up to the borders of China. Who controls that controls the world. And they're not prepared to see that willy-nilly being taken into Russia's, China's, and the BRICS preserve, because it's too much of a loss. All the raw materials, all the energy, all these things that matter so much to modern society are there. So yes, they are indeed intent on this. And we're seeing this play out even today in Syria, where Syria, which in 2011 was targeted by the United States for its support, for its connections with Russia, but also for its support for the resistance, for Hezbollah. And today, Syria is under attack. Lebanon was under attack the other day. And now we have the war extending greatly throughout the region. I mean, a complete realignment of the war is taking place in the region.
Is it a coincidence that within hours of the implementation of the Lebanon-Israeli ceasefire, the war seems to have, and actually has, heated up substantially in Syria? Is that a coincidence?
Absolutely no, not at all. And you can see this quite clearly because what was the last
They're
thing
exposing
that
their hand
happened
working with terrorists.
just as the ceasefire was going? It's not really a ceasefire, it's a truce, but the truce went into effect. What happened was that Israel attacked all of the crossings between Lebanon and Syria by which Hezbollah might move into Syria to support the Syrian government against what happened in the next few days, which was the emergence of this large militarized force in Idlib, in the west of Syria, that has now taken over Aleppo. And the big question was really, was anyone aware that this was going to happen? Yeah, sure. Israel was aware because they prepared for it. Secondly, the United States, of course. In fact, the head of Shin Bet was discussed in Turkey discussing matters with the head of Turkish intelligence just earlier in November. And then the NATO chief was there a few days later. And of course, Turkey is the instigator of this, for all his fine rhetoric. Now, what's it done? It's changed the whole balance because it's brought Russia into the war. Russia is bombing these militants in Idlib who are takfiris. That means people who will cut off heads of people they regard as
Head choppers.
apostates, that is, non-believers. They've already started that, not with
Any
everyone.
Christians they
They've
find
started.
getting the blue.
We've seen videos of them cutting off the head of a Syrian soldier. Now, what I think has happened here is very much that most of Assad's elite forces, which are basically the Alawite forces, Assad is an Alawite and the establishment is Alawite, and it's basically a sect of Shiism that broke away from, if you like, the mothership in the 7th century and established itself in the 10th century in Lebanon and Syria, and was then officially acknowledged by the supreme leader some time ago as a branch of Shiism, as not an, if you like, a heretic group, but as a mainstream Shia group. And so those forces were along the border, trying to make sure that Israel didn't come in to the, if you like, across the border of the Golan, which is very close to Damascus. So they were all stretched along there. And up in the north, Syria really only had conscripts. Conscripts had no experience fighting. I mean, they just collapsed. Now, what has happened is that this has transformed the situation because now Russia has been bombing these groups heavily. I think head of the Air Force or one of the senior members of the Russian Air Force has just been to Damascus to discuss further air assaults. And you have, to a certain extent, Israel attacking, on the other hand, what they claim are Hezbollah forces still across the border. And now we have a new development, which is that Iran has said it supports Assad's government in all ways now, and we have the beginning thousands of Iraqi PMO, that is Hashad forces, have already crossed the border into Syria on their way to fighting these Turkish-led motley. It's a group. I mean, the militia are not just one. There are 6 main militia elements. Some of them are Al-Qaeda groups, formerly Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra groups, under the command of Jolani, who was a brutal leader in Idlib in Turkey. And there were many fights within those groups because they disliked him so much. There are reports that he's been killed. I can't confirm them, but the reports that Jolani is killed, which will change the situation also quite substantially. But you have now Iran entering the war, and you have Israel now getting extremely worried about Iranian forces coming down literally to the borders with Lebanon and their area. And you have Russia. I imagine Putin must be mad as hell at Erdogan, who's really, broken all the Astana agreements, all his agreements with Putin. He's broken by this
He's gonna pay for it.
well-prepared plan. At least months, as far as we understand, the only thing that changed really was they suddenly brought it forward to the end of the ceasefire, because it was scheduled, I think, for a little later. But they brought it forward and activated this large force. I mean, if you see the videos of them, they're all marching. They have beautifully equipped, latest NATO equipment. They have tanks. They have armored personnel carriers. I mean, we're not talking about a sort of ragtag militia that people think of from, 20 years ago. This is a force, that has been well trained. Some of them have been trained by in and around Al Tanaf by the Americans. They were all trained some years ago from about 2011 by both CIA and the Pentagon in different ways and in different places in Syria. mainly to bring down Assad and to remove him from power. It didn't work, but this was conceived as a new operation. How far Erdogan wanted to go, I don't know. But my goodness, he's now put himself in direct opposition to Putin and Russia. I mean, directly, he is in this war. There's no doubt. I know Turkey is denying it, but there's absolutely massive evidence to show that this whole, I mean, and reports from the prisoners taken show that this is entirely managed by Turkish intelligence. Puts himself completely at odds with Russia. I imagine Putin is apoplectic with anger at that, and put himself at odds with Turkey, and with Iran. Sorry, put himself at odds with Iran. Now, what will happen? We have to see. Because now we have the forces from Iraq. Thousands, tens of thousands are pouring in. Iran has promised full support for Assad in this war against these jihadist groups. And it's complicated, but let us be clear about it. These jihadists view Sunni Islam and certainly Shia Islam as apostate, as a form of heretics, and they don't like the Alawites and the Alawite forces. And so Jolani's rule there has been brutal. I mean, he was close to Baghdadi and Damascus. He was a member of Al-Qaeda, pure and simple. He's changed his name several times to Nusra, al-Nusra, and now it is a group that is is called itself HTS, and then there's a group that claims to be secular, and these were the ones that were mostly supported by the American forces. And you remember a little, not so long ago, I can't remember what date it was, but General Flynn, this was a great argument which ended up with ruining General Flynn's career, because he wrote a report, or he authorized an American intelligence report, saying that the aim of these people was to establish a caliphate in Syria. And of course, other states don't, I mean, this puts them, as I say, in terms of religion, completely at odds with one another. It's quite interesting how Saudi Arabia, who was back in 2011 or even earlier, was very much involved with these jihadists, has lent its support completely to Assad. So is the UAE, so is Qatar, so is the Arab states are supporting Assad, which is quite different from what happened in the past. And I think Israel is watching this with some caution. And indeed, they have started to intervene. They started to intervene, and you can imagine where this is going. They sent up a large number of Israeli fighter aircraft into Syria to prevent a civil Iranian aircraft landing in Syria. And they forced it to retreat and return to Iran. Well, let's not guess what's going to come next, but next time it's going to be perhaps rather different. I mean, now we have Israel in another context directly intervening, and there was a security meeting in Lebanon, and the security forces were discussing the security establishment in Israel was discussing what to do about the intervention of Iran directly and the threat it poses to Israel, and postulating, I don't think any decisions were taken, but that the Israelis would have to get more involved in this war in Syria if Iran comes into it, and if arms are now going to come directly from Iran through Syria to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So it's a big mess, in short. I can't hear.
That, and sorry to
No
the audience.
problem.
Let's go back a step or two. Why did Netanyahu agree to the ceasefire in Lebanon?
I think there were a number of reasons, but principally because the Israeli forces were overstretched. I mean, that according to their directives of their military commitments, I mean, the Israeli directives for military involvement, they are understaffed by about 20%. People, the troops were exhausted, protesting. Many of the reservists were not turning up to fight. They'd actually been withdrawn from Lebanon, the reservists, and they'd left it just with the professional army and the Golani army, and they were suffering heavy losses too. So I think the army was desperate for a pause. And then similarly, there was the great tensions within the cabinet between the Orthodox, who are part of the coalition, who refused to do national service in the army, and the secular and also even the religious nationalists who say, yeah, okay, but why should our sons die? And theirs just go on studying the Torah. This can't continue. It's the nation at risk, and everyone has to be a part of this.
Right.
And the Orthodox must be conscripted. It was so tense that it has been very close to bringing down the coalition. So that's saved that element to it. And I think also Netanyahu's been sort of clearing the decks for the Trump arrival. I don't know what's going to come out of that. I see that Sarah Netanyahu yesterday, Sunday, was having a dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago and discussing the strategic, how important it was for Israel to win the war. I don't know, no one reports what Trump said in return. But I mean, that's the emphasis he's moving towards Iran. And here we're seeing it very clearly. Ceasefire, they attempted to weaken Hezbollah, but didn't succeed. So they got the West to help them impose a ceasefire in Lebanon. Then the war moves to Syria. And they knew this was coming, and it was evident. It was planned this way to cut off the weapons supply to Hezbollah. And when that was cut off, then they would restart the war in Lebanon, with Hezbollah weakened by not having its weapons supply. And then it would move on and move up towards Iraq and then Iran. This has been very clearly the plan. And so Netanyahu clearly knew this was coming, and so cut off all the communications between Hezbollah, because in the past, Hezbollah forces played an important element in ending the civil war in Syria. And then what's happened? Look, I think this isn't part of the American deep state plan with the British and the French and the Turkish involvement, because what's happened is Russia has come straight in with its air force and got involved in the conflict. I mean, substantial. The Russian have been pounding these forces in Idlib. And then now we have Iran promising to support Assad to the end, and it will provide the forces necessary to do that. And already tens of thousands of armed Iraqi resistance fighters are crossing. These are Shia, like Assad, like, if you like, Iran, are crossing the border into the I mean, and these are the people who suffered so greatly with the with Al Qaeda, who would kill them, cut their heads off. So they have a bitter experience and have a bitter dislike for the sort of forces that Turkey's been using to this end. And so we have a completely new paradigm where it's now the war has become more complex and wider, and the consequences of it less predictable. It's very chaotic in Syria at the moment. It's not possible to give a, I couldn't now at this stage give you a sort of neat sort of photo of what's going on there, except to say that they're being pushed back considerably. These militia of Turkey tried to go down to Hama, which is a strong Muslim Brotherhood town. Part of Homs. Hama is a sort of a vein of radical Sunni Islamism, and to try and get down there, and they've been pushed back. They're not able to, if you like, create a buffer zone along the border with Lebanon, but they're getting pushed back as the army reorganizes itself and brings its elite forces back from the border and is engaging them in Assad. But this is in Aleppo, but this is going to take time. I mean, yes, you can use air power and you can bomb them, but ultimately you have to clear this area it'll have to be cleared sort of hand-to-hand fighting. This was not, not something that can be just done in a trice. So it's going to be a very complicated war that is now opened up. And, for all Erdogan's posturing, again, the mask has been pulled away, and he's turned out to be, if you like, acting on behalf of simply of Israel and of the United States in this area. I don't know what it will mean, because many of his people were, as you've seen, I think you've seen them, been very angry about what's happening in Gaza and elsewhere. But anyway, he has decided to throw in his lot to try and destabilize Assad, maybe bring down the government, because I saw that the Turkish foreign minister, Bilan Hakan, was urging the people, saying there must be, Assad has to listen to the popular opposition of these takfiris, these jihadists in Idlib. And that's, of course, the last thing that Christians, because there's a large Christian population in Syria, and the Alawites are prepared to listen to that sort of message coming out of Turkey. He's, I think, overextended himself, Mr. Erdogan, badly overextended himself with this game, and maybe the West too. I don't think Russia will get much more involved, because they're going to stay concentrating on Ukraine. They're not going to put troops in or anything like that. Iran might. It might. I don't know, but it might. But anyway, the war is on, and it's going to be a long war and an extensive war.
The lesson is Iran might, and the war is on. Alistair Crook, thank you very much for your time, my dear friend, and for this extraordinary analysis. All the best to you.
President Joe Biden has pardoned his son Hunter for basically any and everything he could have done in the past 11 or so years. The funniest thing about the pardon was that it actually gave Hunter Biden this like 3 or 4 hour window to commit more crimes. And I'm not exaggerating. Now, the funny thing is, yeah, everybody and their grandmother saw this coming, except for the people over in the corporate press who, for some reason, just always believe everything that is said by the government. In fact, these people know that they're lying. That's what they do. But we here at Simcast, most independent media outlets have been saying for a long time, there's no way that Hunter Biden is going to go to jail. There's no way that Joe Biden is going to let his son go to prison. And it's not just about a dad protecting his kid. Now, we've had those arguments where it's like, should a father protect his son and things like that? And, generally, I think so. If you could, why wouldn't you? Now, Matt Walsh makes the inverse argument saying protecting your son doesn't mean pardoning them. It means let them go to prison for the horrible crimes they commit. You're enabling them. And I actually agree. I agree with that. Because Hunter Biden's an adult man, and he actually isn't being helped by his father or protected by his father by being pardoned. So let me clarify and say, it is the duty of a parent to protect their children.
Hunter Biden was the bag man for Joe.
At a certain point, you're not protecting them by enabling them for 4 or 5 decades. At a certain point, you're just like, dude, you need help. You got to go to jail. But I'm going to lay one on you. And I don't like to get conspiratorial. I really don't. But I'm going to go ahead and make some broad assumptions. I'm going to make some broad assumptions, again, which is not characteristic for the most part, but sometimes I do. When Hunter Biden, right, this pardon, in the media, they're saying it is because of the gun charge and the tax charge for which Hunter Biden is expected to be sentenced soon. So Joe has to issue this pardon now-ish. That's what the media is claiming this pardon's about. But if you read it, it's in fact one of the most broad and sweeping pardons in the history of this country, stating that from January 1st on 2014 till December 1st, 2024, Hunter Biden is absolved of any and all federal crimes he may have committed or will commit. That's the crazy thing. This covers everything. Why go back so far? I mean, the gun charge doesn't go back that far, right? Well, many people have pointed this out. First, they stated
that's when they overthrew
charisma.
That's when they overthrew the government in Ukraine.
Going back to 2014 because of the international
put the Nazis in power.
10% for the big guy. Now, I think most people recognize that. Well, I'm seeing everybody on the internet post that, and they're saying, like, this is what it's really about. But that makes me ask some questions. I got to be honest. Why did Joe have his DOJ criminally charge his son in the first place? It's his DOJ. Merrick Garland was his appointment. And this is a question a lot of us asked when it was going on. The typical response was, they're going after Hunter Biden on these lighter charges like a gun charge and taxes because it makes them look impartial, or they can claim they're impartial when they go after Donald Trump for documents or other nonsense. Say, see, we are not pulling any punches. Well, Joe Biden in his pardon says, this is a selective prosecution. What? It's your DOJ. What are you talking about? You could have fired Merrick Garland if you wanted to. I'll tell you what I think. I think the purpose of the gun charge and the tax charge was intentionally to charge Hunter with something that, maybe isn't that big of a deal, but warranting charges. That way, when Joe made the move to cover up the Burisma crimes he had committed, his family had committed, he would have plausible deniability that, no, this is about pardoning Hunter over, guns and taxes. And it's Trump's selective prosecution and revenge. All of it lines up. Now, again, maybe I'm connecting puzzle pieces that shouldn't be. So it's just an idea. I'm not saying I know it's true. I'm saying it's something to think about. They keep saying in the media that Donald Trump wants revenge on his political opponents over and over and over again. And what's the point? So that when they pardon Hunter for the crimes committed in international influence peddling using Joe's name, 10% for the big guy, he can say, these charges are selective. They shouldn't have been brought. Trump's threatening to wage lawfare against my son and use him as a tool to get back at me because I'm an old man. So I'm going to just blanket pardon him. In reality, it was all a setup. Why charge Hunter for the gun stuff in the first place or for the taxes in the first place? Sure. I mean, you could, but these people, look, they find drugs in the White House. So that's like, no, it's not mine. Well, who else is it going to be? I don't know. There's a lot of people in the White House probably doing drugs, to be honest. That's my thought. But let's jump into the news here, my friends. Before we get started, of course, it is Cyber Monday, so head over to castbrew.com and
that our people are feeling right now about Trump. Joy Reid is a threat. She is wishing death and wishing violence and destruction. And you have been warned. America, Reid must go. She used black massacres to black Americans to try to make her point. It's the last efforts. It's the last twitches of a dying journalist. She's destructive. It's intentional. She wants to get fired. She can get an exit package and go down a hero for those Looney Tunes they're watching. It's about Joy Reid from MSNBC. Hopefully, if there is a Lord in sky, she won't be there much longer. Well, maybe MSNBC won't be there much longer. Though I think they're going to keep her because, well, she's very effective at destroying the country. Let me explain. So last night was weird. I had a weird dream last night. It was like a Trump nightmare, right? And I've never had a Trump nightmare before. A literal Trump nightmare is what I had, guys. Listen, I dreamt Trump was altering reality. He had like a secret cache of these skin jobs, like these robots or synthetic people. And I know it doesn't make sense, man, but I kept, it was like these weird spokesmodels were coming out and they were talking to the people in like a press conference. And these people, they weren't people. They were like something else, but they resembled people. Like one of the first ones I remember looked a little like Ronald Reagan. And he was like talking, and whatever he was saying was incoherent. And he was saying how to, he was like laying down martial law. Like, this is the way the country's going to be. And, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I was like, this isn't real. Who's this guy? He's like, and Trump has authorized me to talk to you. I was like, this is not right. Next guy was like George Bush, the first Bush, right? The oldest Bush, the one that's deceased. And, he was like, 8 points a lie, 11 points a lie. And he was like talking, and he was talking about how the country need to go on this new path. I was like, what are these people? What is going on? I'm like, I gotta be dreaming. This is very weird. But I wasn't waking up and I was still in a dream. Then somebody else showed up. It was like Charles Bronson from the action movies, Make My Day. And that was, was it Make My Day? I don't know. But anyway, he was something on a subway train in New York. He was playing this guy like the Avenger. He played in the revenge movies or something. Somebody remembers Charles Bronson. Anyway, short, like tough guy, right? And then the last guy was like, for some reason, it was Andre the Giant, man. Big, cock-strong, big, huge dude, man. But I could barely understand what he was saying. Now remember, this is all a part of my dream. I shit you not, I had this dream that Trump was sending out these cyborg people to talk, and that he was changing the country. These skin jobs would appear on TV speaking about new Trump directives. The people resembled now deceased icons. The dream itself, it made no sense. Right after I had the dream, when I woke up, I got up and wrote this into my phone. Each person was flawed like multiplicity. So Michael Keaton played in this movie called Multiplicity. And what's funny about it is each of the copies were copies of him. He wanted to make his life easier. He said, I'd get more done if I had more people working with me, helping me do my job. So he copied himself and made another person. But every copy was less close to the original, was more flawed than the original. And if you make a copy of a copy, Jesus, then a copy of a copy of a copy, oh my God. So that's sort of like what was happening in this dream. I shit you not, in this dream. So I finally woke up and realized it was a dream. This was the worst feeling. This is the part that got me. This is why I had to write it down. I said, so I was dreaming. Oh, none of that's true. These aren't weird synthetic people talking and part of the Trump thing and like overtaking the country and coming on live telling us all this spooky shit. That's not happening. But that's when it got really scary because I start thinking, this feeling of dread that I had while I was in the dream, is that how people feel right now? Yeah, I said, is that how people are feeling right now about Trump? They believe something that's fantastical, impossible, implausible, not happening at all. Something that's far-fetched, out of a science fiction book, or the mind of a deranged lunatic. But they believe it and they fear it. And it's not a dream. They're walking around thinking that this impending doom is descending upon them and everyone they love, and every part of their lives will be damaged and affected by this dark cloud. And I was thinking, like, this is what I imagine. I'm wondering, is this what people feel with Trump? I don't feel that, but that's what they feel. But for a moment, I felt dread about this dream. And in this dream, I felt dread, like, what are we gonna do? Right? So this altered reality created an evil dictator hell-bent on power and getting his LOLs, his laughs, often torturing us all as we descended into madness. And I think that's what's happening to people. I make jokes about these people. I sometimes criticize them very harshly, like I just did with Angela Rye. I go at them, particularly the political operatives. Not so much the regular people, but sometimes them too. But now I'm starting to look at it another way. You know what? I saw an article. I saw it yesterday. In the article was about Marjorie Taylor Greene. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying that Joy Reid needs to be pulled off the air. That was sort of like the title of the article, something like that. She said something like, Joy Reid is a threat. She is wishing death and wishing violence and destruction and all this, something very negative she was trying to say that Joy Reid was doing with her being in place on MSNBC. And I thought about that. For the first time ever, damn it, I agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, I don't agree with her as a person, her fashion choices, her politics, or her hairstyle. But I agree that Joy Reid is a problem. She flat out makes up shit. And it would be okay if the people that she was talking to didn't believe her. We're not feeling dread. We're not at their breaking points. She's in the middle of a theater yelling fire, and pretty soon some people are gonna get trampled to death. And then she's gonna act like, see, that's what Trump did when it's her. Trump is not even in office yet. I'm gonna play a clip of her doing it. Before I play the clip, I believe Joy Reid is causing mental distress. She must be stopped. Silencing someone is a last resort. I would never jump out and say we need to silence anyone. I'm not for censorship. This ain't censorship I'm talking about. This is self-preservation. This is the mental health of people who watch her show. If Americans are losing sleep over maniacal thoughts of unrealistic, conjured up morbid fantasies by Reid of impending doom, we are in big shit. Where will this lead? Fam, this is worse than Alex Jones. You have been warned. America, Reid must go. I'm going back to bed. Now I want to play for you this clip of her. I want to implore you to listen to her and pretend for a second that you believe her. Don't listen to her thinking like you think. Listen to her as a person who believes that what she says is right, accurate, factual, believable, and is truly going to happen.
Their beds, we are the ones in the wrong. In short, Our dinner, their choice. It's the same energy their forefathers had toward the indigenous tribes. Hey, let's have Thanksgiving dinner on the land we stole from you. But before we pack you off to the reservation and snuff out your culture, could you please pass the corn on the cob? There's the dozens of post-Civil War massacres wiping out Black communities from Louisiana to North Carolina to Rosewood, Florida, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black communities got burned to the ground by racist white mobs. A century later, gentrified when rich folks want to live downtown because it's closer to work. But let's just call it even, because y'all got King Day, a Black president, and Juneteenth. Geez, what more do you want? Accurate history? What, are you trying to hurt our feelings? These are the people who say the undocumented, who they get to call illegal immigrants, like the Pilgrims had permission to come here, have to suffer the consequences of their actions, right? They made the choice to overstay their visas or come into our country illegally. So if they get deported, consequences. But you right-wingers shouldn't have to suffer the consequences of your votes. You don't want to be around me because I voted for fascism. No fair. I'm coughing on you with COVID, but you want me to wear a mask for your safety? No fair. My body, my choice. Well, here's an alternative thought. Make your own dinner, MAGA. Make your own sandwiches. Wipe your own tears. Troll amongst yourselves with Elon and leave us alone. You got your heart's desire, the president you dreamed of, and worship instead of Jesus. And this time, you didn't even have to storm the Capitol, smash the windows, or try to kill police officers or issue death threats to poll workers. See, you did it just by voting this time. Congrats. You got your way. And he even got away with breaking the law. Yay. But if you expect the 73 million who voted for the prosecutor, not the felon, and particularly the 92% of Black women who voted for Kamala to give you a cookie for your vote, a trophy, a hug, a high five, you might be asking too much. If we want to eat with you, we will. But if we just want some peace over the holidays and we don't want to put up with your trolling while we eat our tofurkey, get over it. Stop acting like we owe you. And for God's sakes, stop whining. It's embarrassing. Our Thanksgiving. Our choice.
Now remember, you got to listen to that as if you're a person that agrees with her. She did so many things in that video, that one clip, that I don't think you should be able to come back from. Like, I literally believe, like, honestly, I don't think that she should be able to come back from it. The most egregious thing I'm going to point out is she used, and I didn't want to do any more yelling, man. I've done enough yelling tonight, but I got to tell you, this bat, she used Black massacres to Black Americans to try to make her point about Republicans and Democrats. And I always have a problem when people use our pain and our suffering to their advantage for a political conversation that has nothing to do with us. This has nothing to do with us. This argument that she's having about Thanksgiving, this bat is talking about Thanksgiving dinner and why people that voted for Kamala shouldn't have to be around family members who didn't. Then she says they're the ones that are doing the complaining after she just went on a whatever long rant that was, complaining. It doesn't make any sense unless if you are a person that listens to this garbage. There are families being torn apart because of people like Joy who just want to keep a job. Joy has gone so far, once you gone past a certain line, you can't come back. You got to keep going to the other side of drown, Johnson. She don't have a choice. She got so far off the deep end, there is no way back. She has burnt her boats. She must make it to the other side. She must conquer the villagers. Okay? Because there ain't nowhere to go back to. It's over. People that listen to her don't understand that. They don't understand that her rhetoric may have been good while Trump was out of office, but now she's toast. So what else can she do? Double down. Get pulled from the air, be a pariah, claim victim, and be able to start something else with all the people worshiping her, hosting her up, saying, she's our fighter. She went down fighting. Against what? Our electoral system? What'd she go against? The will of the people. Once again, if people got a problem, like I had a problem when I was a Bernie guy, when they threw Bernie under the bus twice. I had a problem with that. I didn't threaten to leave the country. I didn't leave Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok. There was no TikTok. I didn't leave any social media programs for it. You know, I just, it's like, that's messed up what they did. And then I voted a different way because I didn't even get a chance to vote for the guy. She got a chance to vote for Kamala. The last couple elections, the people I wanted to vote for weren't even on the ballot. This heifer forgot to vote for the person she wanted. Dr. West was not on the ballot in Maryland. Year before that, Bernie wasn't on the ballot. Year before that, Bernie wasn't on the ballot. I voted for Jill Stein. What I'm saying is, Joy Reid has had an opportunity to vote for who she wants. It's not good enough for her. Unless who she wants wins, it's burn it all down. If her person doesn't get into office every time, it's a problem. And for the people that are delusional enough to believe that we have really two parties, you tripping. You are witnessing the complete unification of one party. What part of Kamala Harris hanging out with Liz Cheney, getting endorsed by Dick Cheney, and people embracing that like that was a good thing? What part of that did you not understand? Were you born yesterday? What does that tell you about this divide of parties? Talk to me again about who's the greater evil, who's the lesser evil. Joy Reid's going on here every day doing some version of this. It's the last efforts. It's the last twitches of a dying journalist. She's destructive. It's intentional. She wants to get fired. She can get an exit package and go down a hero for those Looney Tunes that watch her. She's created those Looney Tunes by lying to them, exaggerating to them. I had a good Thanksgiving. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving too. And I think the majority of people did, regardless of what people voted for, whatever they voted for, whatever. That doesn't even have to be an object of conversation. You never change anybody's opinion about their politics. You just give them something to think about. You should never talk to a person with the intention of changing their political views or their religious views. That's up to them. That's a personal thing. Why would you think you could? There's so many reasons why people choose a certain religion or choose a certain political affiliation that it's really none of your damn business, even if they are related to you. That's their decision. And for her to put a wedge, to try to put a wedge between families, and for her to use Black people's massacres, she used church bombings and massacres to try to make a point. As if the people that voted for Trump aren't Black people too, and Latino people. And the people that voted for Trump, that you saying all about deportations, there are Latinos and Mexicans and Puerto Ricans and Africans, all types of people in this country that voted for Trump. It doesn't jive with her rant because every group of people grew. Trump made more ends with every group of people from his last time out, not less. But instead of her doing any type of introspection, any type of diagnosis to what's wrong with her party, instead she looks at the rest of the world and shames them and tries to divide husband versus wife, brother versus sister, neighbor versus neighbor, co-worker versus co-worker. And for what? To keep her shitty job that's going away anyway. Joy Reid has to go. The sooner the better. And maybe some of these people can be saved.
About 2 weeks ago, I covered a story about Al Sharpton, who's also corrupt. Don't let his I've been fighting for advocacy and social justice make you think otherwise. You put money in front of people and you'll be surprised how quickly they can change. Al Sharpton, a couple of weeks ago, I told you that he took $500,000 from Kamala Harris. That was prior to his interview with her. Now, apparently, it is now being brought to light that MSNBC was not aware that he took money from Kamala Harris's campaign before he had that interview, which was aired on their network. And they are speaking out. They are throwing Al under the bus. Al. Al Sharpton's acceptance of Kamala Harris's campaign 500K donation is a bridge too far for MSNBC colleagues. Dun, dun, dun. Here we go. It's all coming out now. The growing scandal plaguing MSNBC host Al Sharpton has been ricocheting around the halls of 30 Rock, with his colleagues calling it a bridge too far for them. And this is coming from Fox News Digital. Other outlets have reported this as well, just FYI. On Tuesday, MSNBC said it was unaware that Vice President Kamala Harris' presidential campaign paid $500K to Sharpton's National Action Network nonprofit ahead of a friendly interview with the Democratic nominee just weeks before the election. Now, what did I say before? And you'll see this also, same situation with Roland Martin. That should be disclosed. When my comrade JB decided to work for Jill Stein's campaign, what did JB do? He immediately announced it on Twitter and announced it on his show and on RBN and let everybody know that he had to disclose that he was working with the campaign. That is what you are supposed to do. So what Al Sharpton should have done is he should have disclosed, FYI, I have received money from the Kamala Harris's campaign prior to this interview. Yes, that is called proper journalistic practice. That is what a proper journalist would do. Let's continue on. It goes on to say here, MSNBC was unaware of the donations made to the National Action Network. That's coming from an MSNBC spokesperson. They said this to the Washington Free Beacon, which first broke the story. Harris sat down for a friendly interview on October 20th with Sharpton, an open supporter of Harris and the Democratic Party. Following Harris's defeat by former President Donald Trump, FEC filings revealed that Harris's campaign gave two $250K donations to Sharpton's nonprofit organization in September and October. Now, let me explain why you disclose. The reason why you tell people that you did receive money prior to interview is because if the interview in some way, shape, or form is a softball interview, which it was, we covered it on this show, the people will be able to say, you know what? He didn't push back on Kamala Harris, but he did tell us that he got money from the campaign. People can put two and two together. But when you don't disclose that information, especially for people who are not following politics throughout the year and may have just tuned in October, they don't know that you're not giving Kamala a fair interview. It's easier for the rest of us who are constantly paying attention to this. Like, I pay attention to politics every day. But for those who are not, and a lot of Americans are not, until like the month before the general election, you don't know that. You don't know that Al Sharpton is not giving Kamala Harris a fair interview. You don't know that there are certain things he probably should have pushed back on that he did not. And then once you find out that he took money, then it all makes sense. So people should do that. I don't care what the political party is. I don't care who the interviewer or the commentator is. That information should be disclosed. I have never taken money from any person on this show that was a candidate. One person came on a couple years ago and offered to donate money to bring forward their story about what happened at their job. But I told them even then, you don't have to pay me. But if you take money from a candidate prior to interview, after interview, whatever, that information should be disclosed because you are going to give them favorable treatment because they gave you money. It goes on to say here, However, the MSNBC weekend host did not disclose to viewers the apparent conflict of interest before or after the interview. Neither did he disclose the donations to his bosses at the network. So Al all over the place, because not only did he not tell the viewers, he didn't tell his supervisors. It goes on to say no one's surprised that anybody at MSNBC was rooting for Harris. This feels like another level of nonsense. Like, you're kidding me, right? This is weird. That's coming from the current MSNBC employee. Harris could have given Al Sharpton an interview and it would have gone the same way. But what are you paying for? There's no way that this can't seem weird. Yeah, because MSNBC, it's a left-leaning network. They support the Democratic Party. They don't support the Republican Party. They don't support third parties. So why are you paying money? And why did Al Sharpton accept the money and not disclose it? That doesn't make any sense. So you can see that here, right? It goes on to say, everybody knows who Al Sharpton is, but this feels like a bridge too far that is not landing well. This has a bit of a dirty feel to it. These things happen and they don't bounce around MSNBC all that much. Like, people just don't care. This one feels, I'd say, like there's a deeper disappointment. There's a sense of like, ugh, we don't need this. This feels kind of grifty and gross. And this is the interesting part, right? We already know MSNBC is seeing a decline of ratings post the presidential election. And I mean, you know, viewers tuned out because you guys sat up there and lied to people and made them think that Kamala was going to just run away with this thing, which was never the case. And some of us in independent media told people the truth. I was one of the people that predicted on the show that Trump was going to get 312 electoral votes. But again, they ran with that narrative. So they lost a good portion of their audience while Fox News actually gained viewers. So to add on to that, now you got one of your commentators, one of your top commentators, taking money from Kamala Harris's campaign and not only not telling their supervisor, but not disclosing that information with the viewers. It tells the people that MSNBC can't be trusted. And I've been saying that for the longest time, but now it's just even more apparent to those who may not have been paying attention. Now, it goes on to say here, listen to this part. There is a sense among the people I've spoken to that this feels like something wrong and something should be done about it. I don't know what that something is. That's a lot of money. That's not a small matter. It just doesn't sit well with people. Al, honey, Al. It just don't sit well with people, Al. So this is MSNBC throwing Al under the bus. Now, I just want to show you a short part of this to show you very from the beginning where Al Sharpton could have pushed back and did not. Let's get into it. This was the interview that they're referring to where Al Sharpton did not push back. Listen to this.
Good evening and welcome to Politics Nation. Tonight's lead, in her own words. I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia tonight, where just a couple of hours ago I sat down with Vice President Kamala Harris. We spoke about the historic nature of her race as she is now facing as an extraordinary historic campaign with just 16 days to go until the election. In just 3 months, that election will take place. Vice President Harris has managed to introduce herself to the American people and pull into a dead heat in the polls. Now she's seeking to draw contrast and mobilize her supporters in the final days of the race, including African-American voters. Meantime, her opponent, former President Trump, is ending with an increasingly hostile and erratic closing message. And that's where we start. Here is my exclusive interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. Well, thank you for allowing us on your birthday to sit down and talk.
Of course, Rap, it's good to be
And
with you.
I want to get to the Georgia vote and other issues, but let me ask you,
Pause. This is something that I didn't catch the first time I covered that interview, but I didn't know about the payment then. She did that interview on her birthday. It just, this is, I don't know this. You know what I mean? She took the time to do the interview on her birthday and she paid him money. So of course he's going to be especially nice to her.
as Vice President, and if you hopefully not presented with it, but as President, with Sinwar having been killed, how would you move toward a ceasefire? What do you think the United States should be doing?
So first of all, look, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but we have got to get this war over with. We got to get the hostages out. We need the war to end. In fact, we're sending Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, out next week to go and meet with the parties there. And the death of Sinwar, I believe, has removed an obstacle to that end. And so we've got to work at it, and we've got to work at it through diplomatic means, and that's what we intend to do. But listen, the reality of it is that the difficulty of it all is not new to any administration in recent history. And it cannot be the reason that we don't work at it around the clock and be vigilant. And that's what we're going to do. And I think it's very important that that's what we do.
And balance. I mean, I remember in Selma, you made very strong statements about civilians being killed on both sides. And you stood up strongly on that. And I think that's a concern in all communities.
Well, I mean,
so notice how he doesn't push back, right? And Kamala was very nervous about that particular part of the discussion. Notice how he doesn't put, so Kamala Harris's birthday is October 20th. Why is that important? Let's go to the receipts. According to the FEC filing, that payment that was sent to Al Sharpton's National Action Network, the first one was September 5th. That's the second row here. September 5th, $250,000. The second payment was October 1st, $250,000. Now I'm showing this because her birthday is October 20th. The payment happened, both payments happened prior to the interview. Now, if I just give you $500,000 and we sit down for an interview and you're interviewing me and I'm a candidate, pretty willing to bet you're going to be a little bit softer on me. So that's important. That is important for viewers to know. So I would argue that Al Sharpton should not be doing these interviews. I would argue that Al Sharpton, especially since he did not tell MSNBC about this, Al Sharpton probably should not even be on MSNBC. Now, they got all these other kind of problems going on right now. They've already cut or reduced Rachel Maddow's $30 million salary. Can you believe they were paying that woman $30 million? Isn't that insane? That's insane. They've already reduced her salary. They're already trying to make other cuts. You guys can go ahead. Look, I'll help you out. You can go ahead and cut Mika and Joe. You can cut Rachel Maddow completely. In fact, you can cut everybody. How about just go ahead and do that? That'll help you out. How about just go ahead and do that? But you have a commentator who has their own show on MSNBC who took money from a presidential candidate and didn't disclose that information and took the money prior to the interview. That is a problem. It's the same criticism that I had for Roly-Poly. Now, Roly-Poly was very defensive over the fact that he took $350,000 from Kamala Harris's campaign. Now, he says they're for ads. So let's listen to what he had to say about that. And I want to show you some of these payments as well.
So we got $350,000 for advertising from the Harris for President campaign.
You're talking about we, not you, Shoshana.
Where did the other 10 billion go? The other 10.6 billion or whatever. I'm sorry, where did that go? Where did it go? Oh, I'm sorry. I know where that money went to. ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, local TV stations, and local media in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Arizona, in Nevada. Reason I know, I went to 5 of those battleground, North Carolina. I went to those 5 of those battleground states. I'm sitting in the hotel room and I'm going through television. Ad. All of those ads actually ran. Let me take y'all, do even better right here. Because remember I said those local ads. Did I say that? Here's a piece in Axios. Political advertise ads boost local TV. That's what the ad said right there. That's what it said right there. Okay. Political ads boost local TV. That means that the ads run. So let me get this straight. We shouldn't take political advertising. Everybody else. But let me just give you another example.
Pause. See, this is the part that I think he's not being genuine about. It's not the fact of you shouldn't be taking ads, etc. Okay, because he owns like Black Star Network, all that kind of stuff. That's not the issue that people are upset about. People are upset because you didn't disclose that information. And yes, Roland Martin also had a one-on-one interview with Kamala Harris, and he received payment prior to the interview. This is a problem. Stop, people, stop. Like, I can't believe it. And then he doubled down. Why you double down? Get out of here, man. He doubled down about this and said he should have received more money.
Let's see right here. iHeartRadio, and I do commentaries on iHeartRadio's Black Information Network. Guess who got political commercials? iHeartRadio's Black Information Network. Do you remember when iHeart ran this 1-hour interview with Vice President Kamala Harris and Charlamagne the God on a bunch of their radio stations? Do y'all think iHeart did that out of the kindness of their heart?
So here's the other problem. Last time I checked, Charlamagne the God doesn't own iHeartRadio. He is a co-host. Let me explain this to people who may not understand. The Breakfast Club is owned by iHeartRadio. Charlamagne the God is a co-host on the Breakfast Club, and then there's DJ Envy as well, right? And then there's another woman that actually replaced Angela. So anyway, you get the point. He doesn't own it. He doesn't own the Breakfast Club. He doesn't own iHeartRadio. And to keep it real, you know, if I see some of these kind of things like that, he owned that and he took money from Kamala, we would call him out too. What are you doing? Stop. Yes, we would call him out as well. So stop it. I've never seen anything like this before.
No, iHeart got millions of dollars in political ad spending. You know who else did? Cumulus Radio, Salem Radio, Sinclair Television. So now I'm confused here. So you got some black folks out here who now are questioning why he gets some money. Because we have a network that reaches millions of people.
So again, it needs to be disclosed, Roland, just like it should have been disclosed from Al Sharpton. And I'll show you this as well. Because this just, again, especially when I see you spending so much time attacking people like me and everybody else online who didn't want to support Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, by the way. And then I look back and I'm like, this is all after you got that money. So I put two and two together, fam. The interview was Roland Martin here with Kamala Harris. Everybody remember this? I don't know if y'all saw it. But this interview, I had this here. This interview, if we look at the air date, October 14th, 2024. So that's when a lot of these interviews took place with Kamala Harris, right? You also gave Kamala a softball interview. If we go to the FEC filings, New Vision Media, which that's Roland Martin's thing, you received the payment of $350,000 on September 9th. That is prior to the interview. So yes, you need to disclose it. You are not just journalist, also commentator, but you own the network. And the network got money, whether it's for ad buys or whatever. You sat down with Kamala Harris after you got that money and you gave her a softball ass interview. I don't know why he keeps trying to defend this. I don't know why you comparing, New Vision Media to iHeartRadio and Charlemagne. Charlemagne does not own iHeartRadio. You own New Vision Media. So stop. It's embarrassing. But again, at the end of the day, what does it come down to, folks? It's corruption. Why would you not disclose it? Are the people going to trust you giving other presidential candidate interviews that you're going to be fair towards those candidates? You were supposed to disclose that information. And I've seen the videos all on TikTok where people are like, I feel some kind of way right now about Roland Martin and Al Sharpton because they didn't tell us that they were paid prior to doing those interviews. So obviously, if someone giving you money, you're not going to treat them in a not necessarily hostile manner, but you're not going to treat them in such a way that's going to hold them accountable. And you're more likely to defend them. So this is part of the reason why I don't take sponsorships for the show. This is part of the reason why, even though a lot of times people will offer, well, I can pay you. This is why no. Because I want to be able to hold you accountable. When you're wrong, I want to be able to tell you you're wrong. I don't want to be like this with you. No. So it's corruption, fam. And it always goes back to money. If you follow the money, you'll see the corruption. And these are the same people. It is Roland Martin, who's one of the same people who said that I was a grifter. I didn't know anything about politics. I don't know anything about broadcasting, even though I majored in broadcast journalism, but it just goes to show you what people don't know. I didn't know anything about I'm the grifter, according to Roland Martin. I don't have sponsorships. He does. I'm not getting paid by candidates, and I don't expect to, and don't ask for it. He is. So who's really the grift? You follow the money, you'll find the corruption. Hey guys, this was a
We begin tonight with a Fox News alert. President-elect Donald Trump has
Meanwhile, Kash Patel as FBI director would be like if you crossed Alex Jones with J. Edgar Hoover in terms of just how much he would want to ignore precedent and the constraints that have been put onto the FBI over the years. With all of the conspiracy theorizing, all of the eagerness to fan the flames of the worst instincts of President Trump put into power, those two things should never mix. Kash Patel has them both, and he is a couple of votes away from that happening once he's put before the Senate.
See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. If you guys thought the meltdowns were crazy over Trump nominating Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General, just wait until you see the meltdowns over the next few days about his pick to become the next director of the FBI to replace Christopher Wray, and that is no other than Kash Patel, who I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are familiar with. I mean, this guy has done so much work with the last Trump administration, trying to dispel the Russia hoax, all of the persecutions against the president. Kash Patel has been a big defender of President Trump. And the guy has basically promised that if he was in charge of the FBI, he would reform the FBI from top to bottom. Okay. He would get rid of the career bureaucrats and rein in one of the most corrupt three-letter agencies that we have. Okay. And this is why the mainstream level media and Democrats are there boohoo, whining, and crying. They're losing their minds over this pick. So I want to go ahead and play this clip from Fox News so you guys can get a better idea of Kash's background and why he was picked by President Trump, because there is a common pattern here among some of these picks that Trump has selected to be a part of his team, to be a part of his cabinet. And Kash Patel definitely fits the mold of what Trump is looking for in his next administration. Take a look.
This is news. This is big news, actually. Trump has tapped Kash Patel to lead the FBI, and he calls him an advocate for truth. Some background information on Kash Patel. He served as the senior director for counterterrorism at the National Security Council. He served as the chief of staff for acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller from 2020, 2021. He also was deeply involved in writing what they call the Devin Nunes memo, which is a few pages that came out that really started to legitimize the skepticism on how the FBI was handling their probe into the Trump campaign back in 2016, and really brought a lot of that stuff to light. And it's something that I think that's one of the things that scares people that are in the establishment or in the deep state so much about him being in charge of an entity like the FBI.
Here's another reason why people are scared. Listen to what he says he'll do on day one if he becomes FBI director.
Then we need to decrease what I call government creep with personnel. The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big. And the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state. And I'd take the 7,000 employees that work in that building and send them across America to chase down criminals. Go be cops. You're cops. Go be cops. Go chase down murderers and rapists and drug dealers and violent offenders. What do you need 7,000 people there for? Same thing with DOJ. What are all these people doing here? Looking for their next government promotion, looking for their next fancy government title, looking for their parachute out of government. So while you're bringing in the right people, you also have to shrink government.
So massive government reform.
Yeah. And you got to work with Congress to eliminate the billets. This is one of the things we did when I was deputy DNI. We got to DNI and I was like, okay, what do all these people do? We've got the CIA. So why do I have analysts doing the CIA's job here? Why do I have a floor of them? Like, give me a good answer. I don't know everything. I don't know a lot. But if you can give me an answer that satisfies their existence, I'm all in. Well, we just have our own people. Okay, well, now we don't. And we went to Congress and zeroed out a bunch of billets, and they hated us for it.
Why? Why would Congress hate you for that?
Not Congress, the public. Congress is like, great, you saved us money. You're the only agency that returned money this year because we didn't spend our entire budget. We were literally funding seats with no humans in them for years. And what the government creep that I was talking about is these agencies go to Congress every year. And again, this is why it's a thing of decades. I need 5 more seats here. I need 10 more seats here. Okay, you keep doing that. How's that going? Oh, we'll fill that seat next year. We're in the process of, interviewing people for that section. And that keeps, no one returns money. It's the biggest fiction in government that you can't return money. Every agency and department that I've ever worked for, when it comes to the fiscal end of the year, they're like, go on trips, go spend money. What? Just give it back to Congress. We can't do that.
That's Kash Patel on the Sean Ryan show. That is, in my opinion, very refreshing to hear. That is very dangerous for others to hear, and they have responded like that, calling him, in fact, unqualified and dangerous. But to me, he also represents consistency. If you see the people that Donald Trump has appointed to his cabinet, the common thread from Pete Hegseth to RFK, from Tulsi Gabbard to Brendan Carr at the FCC, to Kash Patel, to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya at the NIH, is that they all represent what would have been black sheep over the last 4 years, people marginalized and called conspiracy theorists. But today, what they represent is true disruptors.
That's right.
Yeah, that is something that they really don't like, right? It is very dangerous for them to hear somebody say, hey, you know what? I want to come in and actually make the department more efficient. I don't want to spend unnecessary money that we don't have to spend. I want to go after the people who are trying to weaponize the law enforcement agencies of this country to go after their political opponents. I actually want to focus on fighting crime, right? Actually dealing with the real criminals, okay, in this country. That is what Kash Patel represents. And clearly, this man is the right man for the job, considering how much of a freak out MSNBC, CNN, the liberal media, they're having right now over him being nominated to be the next director of the FBI. Take a look.
Andrew, I just want to start first with you and just get your reaction to this news tonight.
Yeah, well, it's a terrible development for the men and women of the FBI and also for the nation that depends on a highly functioning, professional, independent Federal Bureau of Investigation. The fact that Kash Patel is profoundly unqualified for this job is not even like a matter for debate. So I think what we should really be thinking about right now is, what does this signal in terms of Donald Trump's intent for the FBI? The installation, or the nomination, I guess we should say at this point, of Kash Patel as FBI director can only possibly be a plan to disrupt, to dismantle, to distract the FBI, and to possibly use it as a tool for the president's political agenda. And, you know, as an organization, we know what that looks like. This country has been there before, right? The pre-Watergate FBI, the J. Edgar Hoover FBI, struck fear in the hearts of Americans across the spectrum of politicians, people in entertainment, people in the civil rights community, because the director operated at the direction of presidents to collect political intelligence and to utilize the legal authorities, the investigative authorities of the FBI to terrorize and intimidate Americans. So the question is that where we're going back to with this nomination? I would argue that Kash Patel would be the perfect person for Donald Trump to nominate if that's in fact his intent for the FBI.
Now he's fired Christopher Wray, the person he picked, and he's replacing him with a clown in Kash Patel. And he's replacing him with somebody that is not qualified for this job, that has not been an agent, that has not, gained the respect and trust of colleagues, that has not demonstrated that they can be in a leadership role managing other law enforcement officials. And he was a attorney for Devin Nunes on the Hill. He did do some counterterrorism operations for Trump in the first administration, so there is some experience there. But as far as management experience, trust, independence, and it's the person that does podcast hits on Steve Bannon's podcast wearing a MAGA hat. He has his own cryptocurrency, K $H. This is a person that is not qualified for this job in any way, shape, or form. Bill Barr said that Patel would be deputy FBI director over his dead body. Bill Barr says, furthermore, Patel had virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency. The very idea of moving Patel into a role like this showed a shocking detachment from reality. That's Bill Barr. I don't know what more needs to be said. Like what more I could say that is worse than that.
On the program, we have so much to get to today, but since you are such a key national security official, I do want to ask you about President-elect Trump's decision to nominate Kash Patel as FBI director. I mean, as you know, he's a fierce Trump loyalist. He's vowed to go after the deep state. You have worked closely with the current FBI director. What do you think it would mean to have Kash Patel in that role?
Well, look, I'm not going to speak to President-elect Trump's nominees. I'll let him speak for his own rationale. What I will say is how the Biden administration has approached the position of FBI director. We inherited Director Chris Wray, who has done a very good job in the role, from President-elect Trump, who appointed him to a 10-year term. And what makes the FBI director different from most other nominees is they're not just appointed for one term of a president. They're appointed for enough time to last past 2 terms of a president because they're supposed to be insulated from politics. President Biden scrupulously adhered to that longstanding bipartisan tradition, and for a good reason, because the FBI director should not be subject to the whims of the twos and fro's of politics. But as for the announcement yesterday or the decisions President-elect Trump has made, they'll have to speak to that themselves.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Now, when I listen to these people freak out and hyperventilate over Kash Patel, any of Trump's picks, they just make me more confident. Yeah, that's the right person, right? Anytime these people are losing their minds, they're upset, they're boo-hoo, whining, crying, hey, he ain't got no experience. He's unqualified. He's a Trump loyalist. When I hear all that stuff, like, yeah. This is exactly why they should be the person for the job, right? Because again, Kash Patel is going to go in there and he's going to disrupt the deep state, right? Which is the last thing that these people want. They really do not want that at all. And again, they keep talking about how the guy is unqualified when I actually believe that he is very, very, very qualified for the job. They just don't like the fact that, again, he's not an establishment bureaucrat that, they know is not going to rock the boat. And it looks like at least some Republicans early on are getting on board with Kash Patel becoming the next director of the FBI. Take a look.
I've encouraged President Trump to bring Kash Patel to the table for precisely this reason. Unlike Jake, I understand his resistance to talk about Kash, but I'm more than happy to talk about him. He represents the type of change that we need to see in the FBI. If you think about the failures of background checks that have taken place, how could we have somebody like Colin Kahl who tweeted out classified information? I went to the FBI myself. They ignored me. Basically, he was confirmed on a party line vote in the U.S. Senate with Kamala Harris breaking the tie to put this person that should not even have a security clearance in the 3rd most powerful position at DOD. You've got Rob Malley. I don't know how he cleared an FBI check. He's now under investigation. His ties to the Iranian influence regime that worked with him and for him. Ariane Talatabi, who is still at the DOD, should never clear an FBI background check. This entire agency needs to be cleaned out. It's not doing its job. And if you look at what happened, the politicization that took place back in 2016, when senior leaders of the FBI collaborated and conspired to try to keep President Trump out of office. And then when he came into office, they put together this fake Russiagate investigation that hindered the Trump administration the first several years. Look at 2020. Look at what happened there with the fake Hunter Biden story that the FBI leadership worked together with big tech to censor the Hunter Biden laptop that allowed President Biden to basically fool the American public and come into office. There are serious problems at the FBI. The American public knows it. They expect to see sweeping change, and Kash Patel is just the type of person to do it.
President Trump has nominated in Kash Patel, someone who served as chief of staff at the Department of Defense, someone who served as deputy director of the NSI, someone who served as a senior staffer on the House Intelligence Committee. He was a federal prosecutor under the Obama administration, and so certainly has requisite experience for this role. I think there's no question President Trump made very clear that the Department of Justice and the FBI would be reformed if he was elected to a second term. And I think, obviously, with the selection of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, that's exactly what he's going to do. Look, I don't think the American people are interested in a revenge tour. But obviously, if people did wrong in their official capacities, then that's something they should be concerned about. But if they didn't do anything wrong, if they upheld the law, then there shouldn't be a problem. The objective here, obviously, is to reform the Department of Justice and the FBI and get it back to its mission of going after criminals. Growing up in New York, the FBI in the aftermath of 9/11 was focused on going after terrorism. And obviously, in recent years, we've seen the FBI and the Department of Justice weaponized in a way that it has become completely political. That's not good for the American people. It's not good for our system of justice. The lack of confidence that Americans have in the Department of Justice and the FBI is terrible. And so obviously, we want a system that is reformed, that works for the American people, and that prosecutes criminals. And that should be the objective and the goal of every American. And obviously, that's what my hope is as the Department of Justice moves forward under Pam Bondi and the FBI under Kash Patel.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now, what these people are afraid of is that the FBI is going to do exactly what they've been doing right now under the Biden administration, okay? Going after political opponents, okay? Ain't it funny how that works? They're upset and they're afraid of Kash Patel leading the FBI because he may potentially go after Trump's political opponents, which is exactly what the FBI is doing now, except, again, they're just going after Democrats and their political opponents, okay? So they're afraid of getting a taste of their own medicine. Furthermore, what they're also afraid of is Kash Patel going after the criminals, right? Some of these people who actually committed crimes, okay, who broke the law to try to go after Trump. Yeah, they're afraid of that as well, too, okay? But that's not revenge, that's justice, okay? They want to reframe justice as revenge. If you did something wrong, if you broke the law, okay, yeah, you'll be investigated. And if charges should be brought, then charges will be brought against you. And hey, that's it, right? I mean, that's not revenge again, that's justice. That's what's happening. We're going to be seeking justice in this country once again. So don't get it twisted. The mainstream liberal media, they're trying to reframe this because they're afraid of the hammer of justice raining down on some of the Democrats in this country who have escaped that for the longest time. And also, again, they're afraid of the bureaucracy being cut down. In fact, that's what a lot of these people are afraid of. This is why they fearmonger so much about Doge. The last thing these people want, the bureaucrats want in DC, is to lose their jobs. I was actually having a conversation this weekend about this. And a professor was telling me, he was like, yeah, well, you know, it's easier said than done, because once you start to cut from the government, you start to cut the bloat and the fat, a lot of people lose their job. And when people lose their jobs, bad things happen, right? Because they can't feed their families and things like that. Also, there's the issue of these empty buildings that are not occupied by anybody, okay, that the government's paying for. Well, landlords own those buildings, right? So once you stop paying rent for those buildings, landlords get upset and stuff like that. So he was just raising a point that people are going to be upset if this happens. And my response to that was, well, let them be upset. Let them cry about it. Let them cry about it. But the government should have never gotten this big. And if the government didn't get this big with subsidizing things that shouldn't exist, okay, which is not productive, it's not efficient, it's not good for the economy, it's not good for the American people, then, hey, it is what it is. We just going to have to make some tough cuts. We just got to make some tough cuts. We cannot say, hey, let's just continue on with this bloated monster that has become the federal government simply because, well, we're afraid of some landlords not being able to rent out their buildings. Well, again, if the only person they can rent out their building to is the government, then maybe, just maybe, that was not a good real estate purchase, right? Maybe, just maybe, that property doesn't have any real usefulness to it if the only person they can rent it out to is the government, which, again, doesn't really need the building because it's empty, right? It's an empty building that the government's paying rent for no reason. Doesn't make sense, okay? And, you know, it is what it is. But, again, tough choices have to be made. And, again, that's why you're already hearing that the bureaucrats at the FBI, they're shaking in their boots, right? They're upset, right? They're mad, they're scared, they're panicking because Kash is going to come in and he's going to cut down on the bloat, right? And rid the agency of corruption, which is the last thing that they want. These people boohoo, whine, and cry about making the government more efficient and ridding out corruption. It tells you everything you need to know about their agenda. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe.
Well, everyone, I was wrong. 2 months ago, I made a video titled The Real Reason the West Will Never Give Ukraine Long-Range Missiles. But it turns out you can never bet against the neocons in Washington. Fast forward to today, and U.S. advisors and missile operators are working hand in hand with the Ukrainian army having carried out several strikes deep into the Russian territory using long-range American missiles. Not to be outdone, the United Kingdom has followed suit, deploying their long-range Storm Shadow missiles to hit targets within Russian borders. To show you how clueless the West is about the truth, just take a look at this report from Sky News. Zelensky suggests he's prepared to end Ukraine war in return for NATO membership, even if Russia doesn't immediately return seized land. It's quite the statement from Zelensky. I mean, did we all forget that NATO expansion was the cause of this war in the first place? How could NATO expansion possibly be the solution? What this headline really means is that Zelensky is pulling NATO into a direct war with Russia, and honestly, we are standing at pivotal crossroads. Western leaders are being forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. Their mission to topple Vladimir Putin and bring Russia to its knees through a proxy war in Ukraine has failed. But instead of acknowledging this reality, they're doubling down, inching dangerously closer to an expanded conflict. And yes, even the unthinkable, nuclear warfare. If this sounds dramatic, that's because it is. European leaders like Macron and Keir Starmer are refusing to rule out the deployment of troops into Ukraine. Germany is drafting plans to convert public buildings into bomb shelters, and discussions are even reportedly underway in the White House about providing Ukraine with nuclear weapons. These are not the actions of cool-headed leaders pursuing peace. They're the reckless maneuvers of governments gambling with the future of humanity. But here's the saddest part of it all. These escalations are wildly unpopular with the people and the very countries pursuing them. Citizens, it seems, have no democratic say in this march up the escalation ladder. I mean, even the citizens in Ukraine have had enough. The Times published this groundbreaking story last week, showcasing how Zelensky's popularity has sunk after nearly 3 years of war. The cold hard truth is that only 16% of Ukrainians would vote for Zelensky today. That's, of course, if they were allowed to hold democratic elections. Meanwhile, in the United States, these drastic decisions are being made by a lame duck president, a man rejected by his own political party, and whose cognitive abilities are questionable at best. Today, we're taking a closer look at this powder keg, how we got here, where we're headed, and most importantly, how we can avoid World War III. With the recent escalations in the war in Ukraine, the mask has finally come off. Politicians in Washington and Europe have begun saying the quiet part out loud, openly admitting their real motivations. Take it from former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson.
Let's face it, we're waging a proxy war, but we're not giving our proxies, for years and years now, we've been allowing them to fight with one hand tied behind their backs, and it has been cruel.
Just a month ago, calling this war a proxy war to destroy Russia would have been dismissed as Russian propaganda. Now, the same people who would have discredited that critique are publicly acknowledging it. They are admitting, in no uncertain terms, that this is exactly what's happening. This shift is crucial for one fundamental reason. If the West is openly using Ukraine as a proxy, then it follows that the war could have been prevented, or at the very least, shut down early on. And we already know this to be true. Boris Johnson and the United Kingdom personally intervened to ensure the war would continue, blocking early peace efforts and paving the way for hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian casualties. The evidence is right here. American Senator Lindsey Graham takes this even further. His rhetoric goes beyond the usual justifications about defending democracy through a proxy war. Instead, Graham is remarkably blunt. It's all about money, resources, and America's access to them.
This war is about money. People don't talk much about it. But you know the richest country in all of Europe for rare earth minerals is Ukraine. $2 to $7 trillion worth of minerals. So it's in our interest to make sure that Russia doesn't take over the place. 50% of all the food going to Africa comes out of Ukraine. We can make money and have an economic relationship with Ukraine that'd be very beneficial to us with peace.
This isn't about preserving democracy or supporting the Ukrainian people, and Western politicians are no longer pretending otherwise. They're telling us outright the war is about destabilizing Russia, enriching the military-industrial complex, and giving American corporations access to Ukraine's resources. The real tragedy here is the impact on the Ukrainian people. This conflict has turned Ukraine into little more than a battlefield for Western interests. The West is using this war to strip Ukraine for parts, while defense contractors rake in billions. And the cost? The Ukrainian people are being sent to the slaughter. The White House is now pressuring Ukraine to draft 18-year-olds into the fight with Russia. Ukraine has already lost hundreds of thousands of men. If Zelensky succumbs to the U.S. demands and drafts 18 to 25-year-olds, the country's fate will be sealed. There will be no future left for Ukraine. The harsh truth is this: Western politicians do not care about Ukrainian lives. This isn't just speculation, it's their own words. Just listen to Senator Mitt Romney.
Being able to take an amount which equals what, about 5% of our military budget each year to help Ukrainians, about the best national defense spending I think we've ever done. We're losing no lives, and the Ukrainians are fighting heroically against Russia. We're diminishing and devastating the Russian military for a very small amount of money relative to what we spend in the rest of defense.
His comments reveal a stunning disregard for the people of Ukraine. Imagine how a Ukrainian would feel watching that video, hearing how little their lives matter to American leaders. It's a stark reminder of how easily America sacrifices its allies to serve its own interests. When looking at these facts, it's hard not to think about Henry Kissinger's famous quote: "It may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal." The one silver lining in this entire situation is that the path to peace has been very clear from the beginning. As I explained in my video, Why Ukraine is America's Greatest Mistake, the root cause of this war has always been the West's insistence on moving NATO closer to Russia's border. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States has repeatedly broken its promises not to expand NATO eastward. When Putin requested a formal guarantee that NATO would stop its eastward march in exchange for not invading Ukraine, NATO rejected him outright. Despite these provocations, Putin has consistently stated his willingness to negotiate. His demands have remained unchanged. No NATO on Russia's border. No one understands this better than my recent guest, Columbia professor and economist Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs isn't just an expert on global economics. He's been an advisor to governments and world leaders across the globe. Most importantly, he was in the Kremlin alongside the American delegation during the negotiations over the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Sachs advised Russian leaders, Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin, during this pivotal period and witnessed firsthand the guarantees made by U.S. Secretary of State James Baker. His unique perspective gives him unparalleled insight into how quickly the fighting in Ukraine could stop.
If Biden called Putin and said, that NATO enlargement we've been trying for 30 years, it's off. We get it. You're right. It's not going to your border. Ukraine should be neutral. That war would stop today. I don't say that there won't be issues, but the fighting would stop today.
As Professor Sachs explains in that clip, the critical condition for peace is simple. If the United States were to guarantee no further NATO enlargement, then Putin's primary demand would be met. From there, issues like border alignment and territorial disputes could be negotiated in good faith. The United States needs to ask itself one crucial question. How valuable is it to have NATO troops stationed on the border of a nuclear-armed power? To the citizens of the West, and Ukraine for that matter, it's clear that NATO expansion is nothing more than a needless provocation. It serves no one but the military-industrial complex, private equity firms, and the corporations profiting from the war. President-elect Donald Trump has made bold promises to end the war within 24 hours of taking office. And while his intentions may be genuine, Trump's cabinet includes many individuals who are direct beneficiaries of this conflict. Even the high-ranking officials who claim to want peace in Ukraine often do so with ulterior motives. A majority want to shift their focus to China and potentially ignite a similar crisis in Taiwan or the South China Sea. Whether Trump will deliver on his promise to end this costly war remains to be seen. But until he takes office on January 20th, the world waits as America is under the rule of a lame duck president, and the situation in Ukraine has escalated to a point where the stakes could not be higher. While Western leaders claim to be helping Ukraine and standing with democracy and freedom, their actions reveal an agenda driven by power, profit, and geopolitical dominance with little regard for the human cost. Yet despite the grim reality, the path to peace remains clear. The solution is not a mystery. It has been outlined repeatedly by experts and even former negotiators. A simple commitment to halt NATO expansion and negotiate in good faith could stop the bloodshed. This requires leaders willing to prioritize diplomacy over destruction and humanity over hubris. The question now is whether those in power will listen to the voices of their own citizens who overwhelmingly oppose this escalation, or continue down a path of reckless ambition. I remain hopeful that Donald Trump will be able to negotiate a settlement. But once again, we study geopolitics because it affects everything in our world. And now I want to shift to the investing portion of this video and let you know about a recent company we profiled.
However, the concern for NATO was more a threshold in the US because he wants to dominate the world. You can see the United States abroad, that is China wanted to dominate the world, which I don't buy that argument. Never did, never will, because China is not intended, or its intentions is not for that. China's intentions are for expanding the economic opportunities. This is why the global south is moving in a different direction. And when you hear a statement by the president-elect that is going to punish BRICS countries if they move, what are you talking about, man? You know, who are you to begin with to dictate to other countries which currency they can use? So, and this is why I put the question, what lies ahead geopolitically? So I'm going to delve deeper into this. As I said, the article was written by, what's his name? Mohammed Al-Said. It's the one who wrote it in Arabic. So I had a chance to read the entire article in Arabic. Of course, I tracked it down as to where its original came from, and it says right there translated. So my reaction to the article will be in the form of my own analysis because of what I wrote before, and you guys make up your mind at the end. I will answer any super sticker questions towards the end, and we just go from there. So let us start with the idea of, actually, I thought I had, yeah, before I'll get to this, I'll go back to it later. So as I said, the article has been translated, and it was written by none other than Oriana Skylar Mastro. Let me show you, first of all, her picture. Oh, I'm aware of her. I was aware of her, still aware of her, because she's still in reserves in the Air Force. Now, why is this important? Is this important because you need to understand where she's at and where. Sometimes when you read an article, especially coming in Washington, you have to know who is behind the institution behind that. And this is why I'm going to decipher this stuff for you. But her background, she is a fellow at Stanford University. So, and this is for the Institute for International Studies, and she is also a non-resident at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Now, if you know the business of the Carnegie endowments, you'll put the two and two together and figure out why certain statements would have to be mentioned, like, for example, China, and I put this in quote because it's her word, I'm paraphrasing here, because China is challenging the US because he wants to dominate the world. You can see where the argument is going. And I'm going to share both sides of the argument with you, and you reach your argument for that. So, and this is where the argument has been made that the US will be, alliance is losing, US is losing the strategic advantage to this alliance for the first time in decades. But more importantly, Washington has yet to find an effective strategy, which I don't think so. It will be one because we haven't had a strategy when it comes down to global affairs for the last 30, 40 years. All we were successful at is creating, fomenting tensions and so forth. That we were good at. So as far as what the author, Oriana, stated that the US will have to have flexibility of engagements, I won't count on that because we can't trust us. We don't have credibility anymore. So, and this is what I'm going to be sharing a little bit as I move forward. So now let me start from the beginning. By the first sentence that this author wrote was, this alliance led by China. It's wrong. This alliance, meaning Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea, is not led by China to begin with. So let's put the dots on the letter, as we say, because if you don't understand this, then the reason why this was mentioned this way, so to mislead the readers into the thinking from the get-go, oh, this is all China's doing, and it is not. This is a cooperation among those four countries. It used to be three: Russia, Iran, and China. Now you add North Korea into the mix for this. So now, when you look at those three, this alliance, if I may, the four countries, what do they have in common? What do they have in common, guys? If you look at three main countries in this alliance: Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. What do they have? Three of them have something in common. Can you type in the chat box what that is? It's literally two words, or even one. Just think. Uh, once again, Russia, China. Partha, you got it. You got it. Nukes. Nukes. That's what it is. So, as a matter of fact, Karakulak, you got it. Nuclear power. Multi-Ottoman communism. Well, yeah, to a degree, but Iran is not. So, but it depends. If you look in communism as an ideology or as a system of government, yeah, some of them do. Truth seeker, they're against the US. That is correct. So, but the key I was looking for is the nukes, which is the correct answer for this one here. Why? It's because 3 of them have nukes and 1 of them is on the threshold. Now, here is a question for you guys, because I always like to engage you. Do you believe, in your opinion, that Iran already possesses a nuclear weapon? Now, don't jump to conclusions. Just think. In your opinion, do you believe Iran has already acquired a nuclear device? Yes or no? That's all I need to see here, guys. Karakulak, you say yes. YT, you say yes. Rampos, yes, they do. Grace de Joseph, you say yes. Seymour, you say close to. Brad Pards, you say yes. Zara Fatimi, you say no. Hang, you say yes, Iran has nukes. Okay, most of you say yes, I know. And I can see that argument for why that could be the possibility. At least, and again, to my knowledge, as one who was aware of the development of what's going on, they are on the threshold. Now, when I say threshold, what am I referring to here? That means they can acquire it in no time. That's the way. But I cannot conclusively, unlike in the case of both Israel and North Korea, I do know for a fact they do possess nukes. Each one of them has about 110 to 121, to be exact. So, in the case of Iran, on the threshold. But nevertheless, if you think about this picture of those 4 countries, even with Iran on the threshold, this is going to create, or is already creating, a major challenge, a dilemma, if we may use the term, for the Washington establishment. Why? Because U.S. cannot deal with all 4. They cannot deal even with 1, let alone all 4. And that's why, again, I used the word specifically. Will the U.S., can the U.S. stand this alliance? So we all know, because, and this is where you start to think in terms of, if you have to go back to, I take you back to 2020, to June of this year, 2024, of course, which was only a few months ago. So, and I think I made a video about this one here. When NATO was thinking about expanding into Asia, into Japan, to open an office there. So what happened in June 2024? Anthony Blinken, our incompetent Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, along with the warmonger at that time, used to be Secretary of NATO, General Stoltenberg, what did they say? They expressed in their joint statement, expressed their concern about the strengthening of ties between Russia and China. Well, hold on a second. You know, why all of a sudden you are concerned? If you only look at history, that if you go some 30 years ago, Russia, Soviet Union back then, and China signed an agreement regarding this cooperation. So this is nothing new. It's just the development, the upscale of this friendship or partnership, or whatever you want to call it. However, the concern for NATO was more aimed at those 4 countries, because they said Washington is concerned about the strengthening of ties between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. So, and this is why, sort of, why the word came out in Western circle. You all know the new word, right? The new axis of evil, in quote, because that was the term used by a majority of think tanks, analysts in the West, whatever, because they were pushed to use the terminology. Remember, the way it works in the West, most of the West think tanks will push the narrative that the government wants. So when you start to see the word axis of evil, new axis of evil, that was just to foment a sort of doubt in the mind of the readers, because readers will be misled. That's why from the get-go of this article, the author stated, not the article of Mohammed Assaid, because Mohammed Assaid, he translated it. The original one, what's her name? This one. The original one for Oriana, when she started by, this alliance is led by China. Misleading right from the get-go. So, and this is why you have now analysts. Okay, you have now analysts in the West pointing out that these countries will coordinate their military and diplomatic activity. What is no-brainer. Why do you think they're gonna get together for? So to sing kumbaya or just hang out? It's for a specific reason, and that is to meet the new demands of the new geopolitical order, because it's a multipolar order. So that is the reason why. So what they're saying is, what the analysts wanted to put the doubt is that, oh, this is nothing but a rhetoric. It's an empty bravado. They're not going to amount to nothing. Yeah, right. Have the U.S. test any of them and see what the response is going to be. Even though the analysts arguing that, oh, the only main objective of this alliance is to weaken the United States. No. It's not about weakening. They don't care. It's about realigning with the new global order. Simple as that. And with the new global order comes the rearrangement of the geopolitical table as to where everybody sits. No more the United States dictating the turn to all countries. You either take a seat at the table like everybody else on an equal footing, or get out. Simple as that. This is why you're seeing BRICS go in that direction, and also why the statement of President-elect Trump moving into threatening to punish through tariffs those BRICS countries that use other currency. So now, of course, I am not denying that China plays the major role in this alliance. Why? China is economically powerful, militarily very strong, and had the capability and capacity to do so. So I'm not denying that. But to go as far as saying it's the one leading, no. As a matter of fact, China wants to stay behind the scenes. Yes, they are part of the alliance, but keep it quiet. Because if you only know about the culture of the Chinese never brag about stuff. It's not like us here. We brag about what we do. I mean, just look at the deal they reached, or they brokered the deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Who ever thought? And they've been working on it for years. Not a word. It was quietly done till it was presented to the world. The same argument I will make on this. Of course, if we look at Chinese economy and you look at the ties between, for example, Iran and China, or North Korea and China, well, North Korea depends greatly. It's on China because North Korea's Beijing is North Korea's main trading ally. Also regarding Iran, because China bring or purchase a lot of energy from Iran. It makes perfect sense. On the other hand, when you look at China and Russia together, it's no less important. Why is this? It's because China provides, or has almost provided Russia with about $9 billion in dual-use goods. So we're talking about commercial and military applications. So, and that's how it's been. And this is just since 2022, since the Russian military operations that started. So, of course, there is it's a common knowledge, guys. It's not a secret, but it's common knowledge. If it weren't for the support or the assistance economically of the Chinese, Russia could have stumbled economically. It turns out to be not the case. But again, when you consider about Chinese goods that are currently account for about 38% of Russian imports. However, China, as an analyst, I am thinking in terms, China doesn't want to be this, I am the one leading. No, China does not want to be seen as the leader in this alliance. So they just, that's how China conducts its operation. China, to my knowledge, based on what I've learned over the years, and China does not just talk. When they say they're going to build something, they build it. They don't just talk about it. So, I mean, if I am to go even back at 2023, and I remember the statement by Li Qian, when he claimed, and I put this in quote, Sino-Russian relations adhere to the principle of non-alignment, non-confrontation, and avoidance of targeting a third party, end of quote. That was Mr. Li Qian statement. And if I am to go even further back to 2016, so it used to be the China's vice foreign minister. His name was Fu Ying, Y-I-N-G. So, and he's the one who stated, and I quote, because I kept the quote here, Beijing has no interest in forming an anti-American or anti-Western bloc of any kind, end of quote. So when you hear an article written here by Orsana saying, oh, China is leading the bloc, it's misleading right there. So here is the other statement that Oriana stated. China wants to replace the United States as the world dominant power. How many times we heard this? So again, I am not seeing the signs. Now, if China wants to replace the United States economically, why not? Because things gets done. You know what I mean? And why this, I want to be at the top, you at the bottom. Why not cooperate? And this is one of the problems we have when we sit down across from the Chinese. We coming up with this arrogance, with this attitude of we are better, we are higher, we are superior. No need for that. Chinese look at it like, well, if you couldn't even talk to us on an equal footing, knowing that we are economically strong as well and militarily, then what's the point? So, and this is why when the article stated that, oh, China wants to replace the United States as the world dominant power, no. It's because the partnership with Iran, with North Korea and Russia, it paved the way for ensuring the different direction of the new multipolar order. That's what it is. That's something we are not willing to accept, as I mentioned earlier. So when you hear statements, because I'm going to post the link for you guys, for you to read it yourself and reach out to your conclusion for that matter. And this is why, on one hand, there's three countries, when we think about Iran, North Korea, Russia, on one hand, they are with China, of course. The United States is thinking about it in terms of, okay, how can we create more tensions, especially in the neighborhood of China, because we already fomented tensions in the neighborhood of Russia, Ukraine, in the neighborhood of Iran, Gaza, and now we're pushing for the enmities or tensions in the neighborhood of China. And as a matter of fact, I feel comfortable saying we already started that. Which country, in your opinion, that is now experiencing domestic turmoil, politically speaking? Can you type in which country in Asia that is experiencing political turmoil right as we speak? Domestic. Not Indonesia, no, not Myanmar, no, not Georgia, in Asia. Oh, Jesus Aguilar, you got it, Philippines. That's why I reached out to Anna, bring her back, because you guys need to know this all of a sudden turmoil inside Philippines is no coincidence. It is no coincidence. And that's what I'm saying. So you foment deep enmities within the neighboring of whatever country you want to do. And we are famous for doing that. So this is where the Carnegie endowments comes in. That's what I'm saying. You always have to go back to the source of where the article is coming from for you to understand. So, and that's why those now Western thinkers are saying, well, in this case, China has to walk fine line. No, China doesn't need to walk fine line because it doesn't care. Why would it walk a fine line? If he wants to develop a relationship with other countries, then be it. So, you know. And even now, like the like of what's her name? I always keep forgetting her name here. Oriana. Yeah, Oriana. The likes of Oriana now saying that for China, for the U.S., it is the U.S. that is allowing China to get the best of both worlds, develop and also build an alliance. Well, wait a minute. What can the U.S. do to prevent that? Anyway, there's only one option: to create tensions. But even with that, China won't be able to take the heat by itself. And that's what I'm going to lead into talking about this one here. Now, we ought to ask a question. Is this alliance going to be sort of be the way like you and I know about conventional military alliance, the equivalency of NATO? We're not going to compare it to NATO, but the equivalency. So far, I didn't see any of that because there is no treaty that all of them have signed that says we are, in the case one is attacked, we will defend the. No, I didn't see all that. What I do see is the close cooperation on both economics and military among them. So, and that's remained to be seen. I am not saying that it won't happen, but the possibility of it. So let me take you back to the 50s, and especially if we are to talk about China and Russia in this case, because those are also the two main players in this alliance, if I may use the term. So if you are to go back to the 1950s, right after the outbreak of the Cold War. So what happened at that time with the CPC, the Communist Party of China, and the Soviet Union? This is again where, when you go back to the June 2024
with you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, it has been quite the week, guys. So how about we get right started? I wanted to start with you, Scott. It has been quite the whirlwind over the past 5 or so days since November 27th. We see the situation in Syria really spiraling out of control over this period. There were reports of the Syrian Arab Army's retreat from Aleppo. Now the al-Nusra Front, or what is now called HTS, has taken a significant portion there. We know that now clashes have heated up between the Syrian Arab Army. Russian airstrikes are occurring. There's been a whirlwind of diplomacy as well between Syria, Iran, and Russia. I'd like you, if you could, because this is a topic, Sky, I know you've covered this for many years, that has been subject to much propaganda, or what the kids like to say, hasbara these days. Could you help us understand what is going on right now in Syria and how it has related to the geopolitical developments that we have been covering so much here on this channel?
Well, I mean, I'll start off, as I always do, by pointing out that, I am looking at this long distance based on fragmentary reports that come in from sources that, in the real world, I wouldn't use. I'd like to have eyes on target and things of that nature, but we have what we have. And so what happens is you have to filter this through, I guess, past experience, history, et cetera, to try and come up with an assessment of what's going on. It appears that this offensive is something that has been in the planning for some time now. These forces are well trained, well equipped. They're operating off of a well thought out game plan, and it's something that's clearly been rehearsed. There are reports that they had sleeper cells inside Aleppo that were able to emerge and help sow confusion. The Israeli activization of exploding pagers implies that Israel was factored into this effort. This couldn't have happened without Turkish, not just Turkish permission and support, but Turkish participation. Many reports from prisoner interrogations, which always have to be taken with a grain of salt, but backed up with some other evidence, clearly shows that the Turkish military was involved in planning and executing this operation. They made extensive use of drones, according to the reports. Ukrainian operatives were involved in the training of this, so Ukraine was involved in this as well. And I think what we're looking at here is something that this was no accident. This wasn't just a spur of the moment decision. According to the reports, this coordinated effort was supposed to take place in March, but that it was accelerated because of the developments that took place in Lebanon, in particular, the Israeli conflict with Hezbollah and a ceasefire that was signed. I think there was a feeling, this is again just my assessment, that when you looked at all the factors that normally contributed to a strong and resilient Syrian army, a military government, almost all of them were dormant. Russia, which had, of course, intervened decisively in 2015, stabilized the situation for Bashar al-Assad, had kept a residual force in Syria, but it wasn't as robust as it once was. And I guess the feeling was that because Russia was bogged down bogged down, or quotation marks, in Ukraine, that Russia would not be able to respond decisively in favor of Syria. The Syrian army itself had gone through a demobilization because of the political guarantees that had been made in Astana a few years back between Russia, Iran, Turkey regarding the situation in Syria and the stabilization of what was going on in Idlib, where this al-Nusra Front derivative is based out of, along with the Syrian National Army and some other elements. Hezbollah, which played a very important role in the stabilization of Syria and in the Syrian counteroffensives, of course, now is bogged down inside Lebanon. And Iran was likewise focused on what was going on with Israel. And also keep in mind that Iran also has problems brewing up north with Azerbaijan, and Iranian military resources have been diverted up there. Iran has a brewing another problem, along its border with Pakistan and Afghanistan. So the feeling was that Iran was not going to be in a position to be able to decisively intervene. And so you strike while the iron is hot, and that appears to be what they have done. And they achieved a surprise. And with that surprise, in many ways, it reminded me what happened when Ukraine attacked the Russian forces in Kharkov in the late summer, early fall of 2022, exploiting thinly held lines, being able to penetrate deeply with light armored forces, cut off roadways, etc., and generate confusion, prompting a retreat. And this appears to be the case. There are Syrian casualties. I can't say exactly how many. It looks like many people have been taken prisoner, but it also looks as if large quantities of the Syrian army were able to withdraw from Aleppo in decent order and fall back on prepared positions. Reserves have been mobilized relatively quickly. The 4th Armored Division and I think the Tiger Force have been brought up. And the Russian Air Force, I don't know what people thought was going to happen, but it has come to life, and it is blowing the living crap out of the HTS out of the al-Nusra people in Idlib, along with the Syrian Air Force. Hezbollah is engaged, and Iran is engaged, sending its own forces and mobilizing Iraqi pro-Iranian militias to coming in. The situation is stable. I would say right now, I would say that the gambit has failed. That there's a lot of heavy fighting left ahead. But I think the loser in all of this is Turkey, who will never again be trusted through the Astana process. You can't just write Turkey off, but Turkey is a regional a player, so they will be a part of any negotiation. But the day of a trusting handshake and a knowing nod is over. Erdogan can never be trusted again by anybody, and this will make whatever. I think that there will be more inclination on the part of the parties involved to finish this fight this time, as opposed to rely on some sort of diplomatic off ramp. But that's speculation because again, Russia is in the end game phase of Ukraine, facing difficulties with NATO and the United States. They have Trump coming in. That Trump administration on January 20th is a huge wild card because a lot of people, a lot of nations aren't willing to do things that are precipitous at this point in time, opting to hold off. To give you an example, Iran has said that it's not going to strike Israel until, and they're going to let Trump come in and see what happens. You hear a lot of language out of Putin about, softening Trump up for whatever is going to happen on January 20th. So yeah, I don't see them committing heavily to a major engagement with Syria right now, only to have to pull back if Trump starts, making reasonable diplomatic, overtures. So I think heavy fighting, no need to panic. Bashar al-Assad certainly isn't panicking, and I think Turkey and the rebels are going to pay a very, very heavy price.
Andre, I wanted to kick it to you, especially with regard to Russia. There's been a lot of criticisms being hurled all across, not just Western media, but all across social media about Russia's role here and how Russia was not maybe strong enough in the process to rid of these forces to begin with several years ago during that Astana process. I wanted to ask you, though, what do you think of this as well as the overall situation in Syria, especially in regards to militarily how things will play out from here?
Scott pretty much covered it all, actually. There's very little to add, and I have to say that I completely agree with him on his assessment, with the exception of the Trump, but that's the minor, basically, disagreement. Other than that, I mean, it's difficult to add anything. And again, you have to understand, it is pretty much desert environment, and Aleppo is placed to the north, about 30 miles from Turkey, and basically surrounded, not surrounded, outflanked by to the west by Idlib province, where this whole thing originated. So it's inevitable, but they need to run those convoys and what have the so-called sustainment force, if you wish, in the desert environment. And this is the perfect, the Turkish shoot for, as already have been seen by Russian Air Force and Syrian Air Force. And essentially that will end up where it always ends, because the only way for that type of the force, which is terrorist force, to survive is to hide behind civilians and embed themselves into some kind of the urban environment, those buildings and other places of this nature. So yeah, it's going to be basically a mop-up operation at some point of time, trying to dislodge them from whatever they have been able to capture, which they evidently did. But as Scott correctly pointed out, there is very little sense of panic, and it's like, in Russian military circles, people say, yeah, here we go again. The Arab militaries, it all depends who was bribed by who. And as I already stated, the Syrians, they kind of, relaxed a little bit. Good for them, and, going back into shape. But as correctly stated by Scott, and I can only confirm, Turkey is the biggest loser. Obviously, their foreign minister today stated that, oh, everything was done behind our backs. We never authorized anything like this and things of this nature. So it's all we know it's all BS, obviously, but we have to keep in mind that it's not just Turkey which pursues its own interests in that area. There is also United States and a combined West, which have literally their behinds handed to them in Ukraine. And Georgia is another link in all this classic American geopolitical posture of the using indirect strategies whenever dealing with the serious people. So, and this is what is happening. We might expect some other conflagration. Russia totally expected that. Today, Putin was spoke to president of Iran. I'm pretty sure everything is coordinated now, and China already came out and stated that we are completely behind President Assad, and so yeah, that's in the larger scheme of things. I would say it's a with the tactical conflagration. It definitely has a bearing on the overall situation, but in the end, this is all about what is happening. In former Ukraine, because it doesn't exist as a Bible state anymore, and the closing phase, so to speak, arrangement phase with the combined West, because Russians still are deciding, do we need the whole damn Ukraine, or do we really have we'll arrange it somehow. Obviously, Mr. Kellogg he will be laughed out of any negotiation room with Russians, and especially Russian military, who will be looking at him as just second-rate military, let alone. So, and Trump, whatever Trump does, it's just the basic thing for Russians to decide if they really have to go and deal with the complete whole of Ukraine, or whatever the arrangement will be. Judging by the Kharkov area today, which, I mean, there is a real, basically a positive, if you wish to use this term, dynamics, the activization of the hostilities. So who knows what's the plans by Putin and general staff and other people, but it's all the same picture. It's all the combined West, and it's all this. They are infantile. The Western national security establishment are illiterate people. They really do not understand. They never did the nature of the warfare, especially modern warfare, and as a result, they do what they always do. Let's just sow the chaos here and there. So that's pretty much the pattern. It's beaten to death pattern, and it's always anticipated nowadays.
Scott, I wanted to ask you, does this, some have been making the comparison of what's happening in Aleppo and the northwest Syria area with what happened in Kursk, where you have these forces attempt to opportunistically create the image of a victory, an incursion, a humiliation of the of the adversary, whether it's Russia or here Syria. But now, as Andre said, that Russia, Syria, there will be a mop-up operation. I'm just curious on your thoughts about this, especially given what Andre was saying about the players involved here, because it also seems like Turkey is being centered on, which I think is, on the one hand, important because Turkey is a primary backer of HTS, this former al-Nusra Front, but also because I think Saudi Arabia, Qatar, some of these Arab countries that used to fund and arm these forces are backing off and saying they support Syria. Your thoughts?
First of all, I wouldn't compare it with Kursk. Kursk was, whatever you think of the Ukrainian military, I think we have to acknowledge it's a world-class military. They know how to fight. The forces that went into Kursk were trained by NATO to the most modern techniques, modern communications, modern command and control. Ask the Russians; they're dying hard. I mean, if this was a soft force, Kursk would have been recaptured by now. Kursk hasn't been recaptured by now because the Ukrainians fight. They fight hard. And so I think qualitatively we can't compare the two forces whatsoever. These terrorists that are coming down are incapable of a stand-up fight. They're they're they can do light mobile action, etc. But when they come up against a serious ground force, and the Syrians are a serious ground force, they lose. There has been hesitance in the past about uh, pushing the advantage because of Turkey and the fear of, not fear per se, but the concern of on the part of Syria and Russia of confronting Turkish troops. If you recall, a couple years ago, the Turks sent a column down, and Russia bombed it to, but that's not something they want. And so the concern was always not to provoke. I think that concern's gone. There's going when the forces get mustered, and the line becomes stabilized. I think you're going to see these forces fold like a house of cards. They're just not capable of sustained high intensity combat. I don't think they have the resilience. One thing about the Ukrainians is they rotate forces in. They reinforce. You know they're willing to die in place to defend a piece of terrain. I don't. I'm not saying these guys aren't willing to die, but they can't fight. They don't know how to fight like the Ukrainians can. So I wouldn't compare this with Kursk at all. Maybe they were hoping for a fait accompli. I think the goal was to push forward as far as one could and hope for some sort of political collapse in Damascus that would have created problems for the other nations to rally if Assad wasn't there. There was talks about a coup d'état. I don't know if one was planned, if they thought they had one planned, but clearly nothing took place. But when you look at it, this operation only works if you exploit the surprise with some sort of collapse on the other side. It hasn't happened. So this operation is doomed to fail because these forces are not capable of the al-Nusra forces are not capable of sustained high intensity conflict. They just can't do it. They don't have air defense worthy of the name. And once the Russians and the Syrians get their air ground coordination act together, it's going to be hell on earth for these people. They're just going to get blown away by air power that they have no response to. And I don't think Turkey is positioned at this point in time to intervene. As you have the foreign ministry saying we didn't know anything about it. So what? Now they're going to follow up by deploying 3 Turkish divisions into Syria to save these people's hides. It isn't going to happen. So I don't think this is like Kursk. I think this was a gambit, and I so far it's failed, and that's where I'll leave it.
Yes. Any response to that, Andre?
No, I mean, I agree generally with Scott. The only difference is it's not because Russians do not want to recapture Kursk area, which is reduced now to about 80 square kilometers, which is nothing really. It's the fact that this was an operational opportunity to basically do what NATO did. And while NATO may learn some tactical tricks on the ground, I mean, operationally, it's not in the same league. And as a result, what happened there, a whole combined arms army died in Kursk. And this is NATO army, including so we are talking about, yesterday it was 36,000+ TIAs alone. That's, by the way, Army Corps. So you have now what's the name of it, wounded and sanitary losses. And 223 tanks alone since yesterday, until yesterday, I mean, was annihilated. Most of them Western tanks, Leopard, Abrams, and Challengers, which performed dismally. So basically, what happened in Kursk, literally the best what they had, the forces, and they were forced to this was planned by British, and that means what? Whenever British plan anything, it always ends with market garden. They throw people there, they get killed, and taken POWs, So that's pretty much the situation there. It's different scale, it's different forces. And now, obviously, when you look at the whole line of the combat or the contact, in which is 800 miles pretty much. So everything is active practically, everything. And there is, well, if you ask average, 1 kilometer per day average advancement, considering the fact that it's most of this advancement is within the urban area. This is the only thing they can do actually right now, whatever is left of armed forces of Ukraine. That is why you have so much hysteria around the combined West. And as I already stated, you have to look at those things. In Syria, in Georgia, they probably will try to, make some conflagration, maybe in Southeast Asia somewhere. So there is always some kind of what they know. They know only one thing. It's Mackinder, it's the heartland, period. And that's the illiterate people, because this is what you get when you study international relations in the American and Western universities, because that's the only thing they know. They do not understand the technological paradigm. They are humanity's dumbed down people. They do not understand that it doesn't matter anymore. Heartland doesn't matter. You have Sarmat, which can fly around the world, so how much, Heartland matters. So, and that's the issue. And in terms of Syria, as I already stated, there is my good friend Marat Khairulin, and he came out today with his review, and he has the access to people who are actually the veterans of Syria. And if you go to his Telegram channel, there is a headline there: Syria, not a catastrophe, because it is not. It's just the tactical event, tactical conflagration on the, in the larger scheme of things. And so what can I say? We will have to wait and see how there will be reaction. And what Scott correctly pointed out, which we should never lose the focus of it. IDF, Israeli Defense Force, it sustained a horrendous beating in Lebanon. Scott knows about this way more than me because he has experience in this area. I mean, it's incomparable to mine. But point is, obviously Israel is partially behind, or maybe fully behind that, so, and they needed the breathing room. Obviously the issue of the ceasefire, which they, praise, but point is it also releases some forces of Hezbollah, from the combat activities. They could be easily transported to which they probably already are there. And then it has to be understood, I noticed this for years now, that when you look attentively at people who plan, especially in London, and again, I have to quote Colonel McGregor about their military, Lilliputian. They, for some reason, think that they are really good at operational planning. I don't know what those reasons are. It's definitely is not logical. It's probably metaphysical. But the point is, they do not understand what operational and strategic reserves are, how they employ, and how they gather. And each time they think that, oh, we can create this and situation. And as I already stated, that in Kursk they killed pretty equivalent of the combined arms army. Now that will be the same in Syria. And as I already stated, the air power is there. It's in place. Khmeimim is not far from Aleppo. It's a little bit to the north. They can create the operational tempo for the aviation, which already did. And again, just 2 days ago, there was like flight of the whole squadron, 12 Su-34s in one go. That is a lot of firepower, let me put it this way. So, and yeah, they talk about, and there is some objective evidence that 1,000 or more of them have been killed. So, just not good for them.
Yeah, well, Scott, I want to bring it back to you. I feel like Andre was reading my mind, because my next question was going to be to you about the role of Israel in this emergent crisis in Syria. Benjamin Netanyahu, as Andre has alluded to with regard to the so-called ceasefire, he gave a speech reacting to the ceasefire where he said that Syria was playing with fire. Many are making this connection that he was threatening Syria and that there was already in the works involvement in reopening this front. So I'm curious on where you see Israel fitting into this picture with regard to the crisis in Syria.
Well, I think the first thing we have to point out is that Israel and Turkey historically have very, very close relations, especially military and military, but even more intelligence. Um, and the Turkish intelligence service is fully capable of doing the most devious, rotten things. Um, and they have a history of working with Israel on a number of projects that take on Iran. I think everybody talks about the Israeli presence in Azerbaijan. That doesn't happen without the Turks. Um, the Israeli presence in Kurdistan is closely coordinated with the Turks. Israel's anti Iranian nuclear strategy, where they assassinate scientists and things of this nature, doesn't happen without the Turks. The Turks are very closely linked to Israel. So when there was a lot of talk about this offensive, and if you take a look at it, this taking Aleppo and then this bold thrust down to Hama, um, it's designed to sever a ground line of communication connecting Abu Kamal, which is a Syrian town on the border with Iraq along the Euphrates River, Al Qaim. Anybody who knows Iraq and in the geography, it's right across the river from Al Qaim. It's well known. It's been bombed many times by Israel and the United States, Abu Kamal, because the Iranians maintain warehouses there where they receive equipment and then they send this equipment off to Lebanon through a ground line of communication. The Israelis want to sever this, want to disrupt this, and so there was a lot of talk that this offensive was designed to achieve that, in part to boldly thrust down, get Haman Homs to fall, and that would create big problems for this line of communication. And again, if you can get Assad to collapse, that takes Syria out of the game. And this is part of Israel's strategy, is to eliminate the Iranian presence in Syria and to eliminate Syria as a conduit for the transfer of equipment to Hezbollah so that Hezbollah could be starved out. Um, so this is the Israeli objective. So I believe the Israelis were involved in every aspect of this planning. And what you see now, to show you the desperation, I think Israel may have helped trigger this. I think Israel may have said, "You got to go now. You got to go now because of the weakness, the perceived weakness of the axis of resistance. Don't wait till March. They can get their act together again. Trump will be in. There will be a new geopolitical reality. We got to go now. We got to go now. We got to go now." So I think it's Israel that fired the green flare that got the forces to launch. And take a look. As soon as they start stalling, as soon as the Russian Air Force, I mean, I don't know if it's still rumor or not, but killing Jolani, hitting command and control bunker, killing leadership. This advance is going to fall apart very quickly. Israel immediately says, "Well, we may have to move our forces now and open up a front down south." Why? To divert Syrian resources away from reinforcing. Why? Why would you have to do that, Israel? What? Normally, you'd have to say, what business is it? What's going on in Idlib? Why is Israel? But now we are talking. This is a strategic move by Israel that's failing. One of many failures Israel has suffered. And when this does collapse, understand, there's a lot of people out there misreading, I believe, this ceasefire in Lebanon as an Israeli victory. It was an Israeli defeat. The Israeli military was desperate to pull the plug because they could not sustain the operations. Let's not kid ourselves. Hezbollah was hurt. I mean, Hezbollah took some hits. Nasrallah's dead. Senior leadership's dead. Middle management's dead. Maybe some ammunition storage is dead. But so Hezbollah got hit hard. They're in pain, but they're not dead. They have tremendous resources, tremendous resilience. and they were resisting. I mean, up until the time of the ceasefire, as Israel pushed forward into various villages, they were getting waxed by Hezbollah, who, from a tactical perspective, had control of the terrain where they were fighting. Israel needed this ceasefire to pull their forces back and regroup. They were very effective in playing. Again, I don't want to reward Israel for anything, but Israel murdered a lot of Lebanese, and they paid the dividends of this because the Lebanese were exhausted by this. The Lebanese, unlike 2006, I think the bulk of Lebanon understood what Hezbollah was doing and supported what Hezbollah was doing. But it just got to be too much of a price for a nation that's already under a lot of economic strain, domestic political divisions. And the difference between 2006 and today is that Hezbollah is a major political party, maybe the major political party in Lebanon today. They have an obligation to the Lebanese people and the Lebanese state that didn't exist in 2006. So when Lebanon as a nation is buckling, is feeling pain, and you're starting to see people question, what is Hezbollah up to? Hezbollah, I think, also had to take a pause to see where the political chips are falling inside Lebanon. Who's going to be president? What's the parliament going to look like? And Hezbollah put too much effort into becoming this political party of relevance to throw it all away. Hezbollah was never going to commit suicide for Gaza. We saw it from the start. The whole concept of managed escalation was to maintain pressure on Israel, but Hezbollah was never saying, we're going to go all in, we're going to do all this, because they can't afford to. They are part of Lebanon now. They need Lebanon behind them. So Hezbollah pulled back, did the ceasefire. One of the things that come out of this ceasefire, and you're already seeing it, is Israel can't be trusted. They're just liars. They violate it. They take advantage of things. And there's recognition now that Israel never intended to keep this ceasefire. That's okay. Hezbollah, what's going to lose a hill here, a valley there, and they're not losing anything. They're getting the recognition again, and they're also giving Lebanon breathing room to regroup and all this. So that ceasefire wasn't this resounding Israeli victory. It was actually a reflection of Israeli weakness. And therefore, look at the panic of Israel, because if the military said we have to get a ceasefire in Lebanon to pull back and give these forces breathing room, and suddenly they're going, oh no, we have to go and open up a second front against Syria. Why? Because this fight in Syria has far greater resonance for Israel than just about any other actor out there besides Turkey. This is a life and death issue for Israel. Israel is desperate right now to break up the axis of resistance. They felt there was a moment that could be exploited. That's what this attack was supposed to do. It's failed. And now, if this goes away, Israel's out of cards. That was it. What other cards are out there for Israel to play right now? This was it. This was the last remaining card to get Turkey to pull the trigger on this offensive designed to exploit Syrian weakness, bring down Iran, isolate Hezbollah. And it failed. But I think this war has Israel written all over it. This was an Israeli designed conflict. Everybody else came in and played their role. But this was something that's of strategic importance for Israel. That's why you're seeing Israel panic and take an ill-prepared military and talk about open up a second front, because they can't allow Syria to win. Although I think Syria is going to win.
Yeah, and Andre, the timing of all this was so interesting, because not only did you have the Lebanon-Israel ceasefire occur just before this, or at least went into action and practice just before this offensive in Syria, but it also comes not too long after Russia launched the Oreshnik and has continuously said it was going to move up the escalation ladder with this mega, absolutely game-changing missile should NATO, the United States, continue their escalations. Could you comment on this timing, given everything Scott said with Israel in particular, But this whole geopolitical picture appears to me to be kind of the flame that lit the fire underneath the forces of regime change across the, as you call it, the combined West to engineer this latest Syria debacle.
Well, yeah, in terms of what Scott delivered in the last couple 5 minutes, you cannot get better than that. I mean, this is just absolute, succinct, expressive description of what is going on. West can do only regime change, and even that, the counter measures have been already developed, and you saw yourself those attempts have been extinguished in Kazakhstan and in Belarus, respectively in 2021 and 2020. And the question now, militarily, it never was actually in doubt. I wrote my first book 7 years ago. I already basically explained then that, dudes, it's over. Technologically, it's over, because what you get the operational and strategic level weaponry, which doesn't have to be nuclear. Basically, that's what hypersonic abilities give you. And obviously, when we talk about, for example, Areshnik was just one of many things which are happening. If you go to my blog, for example, you will see yourself the presentation of the Russian Defense Ministry, and it was in April. Just one of the examples, just a single Kinzhal. Kinzhal is, never launched and doesn't have the separating warheads, MIRVs. And you can see yourself the recessed, reinforced bunker of the whole group, army group of Donbass of the armed forces of Ukraine. And you can see it before and after Mr. Kinzhal visited it. It's a complete devastation and everybody is dead. So basically what is told to the combined West, which I was basically preaching for a while, for many years actually, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where your command posts are. They will be either gotten by Kinzhal, by Zircon, or in the case of the large assembly areas, you can get absolutely non-nuclear, even inert warheads, which by Areshnik, which gonna fly, nothing you can do about. And that's the whole point. And evidently, well, considering the intellectual level of Biden administration and this national security circle, as already stated, mostly ignorant people, the visuals evidently did produce some impression. Now, if they want to continue to attack Russia with all those ATACMS and things like that, now, well, there are very many fat NATO targets which Russia can do, and that will be demonstrated and it will be shown to the whole world, which already knows that Russia is capable of doing this. So we are looking at, again, at the arrangement phase. Another matter, we do not know what Russians know. Well, we can speculate, okay, let me put it this way, about a Trump administration. But basically, when you look at Trump's new upcoming or incoming national security team, it's, my God, it's probably even worse than Jake Sullivan, especially when you look like this clown, Sebastian Gorka, or you look this Mr. Walz. Wow, the guy with the degree in international relations will be advising Trump on the modern Russian military. Good Lord. But the point is that, I mean, there's nothing literally West can do other than provocations, false flags, and things of this nature. And that's what they probably were dreaming about, eliciting some kind of the irrational response from Russia to basically, do what they planned all along. Throw whatever is left of Europe into this meat grinder, while the United States thinks that it can sit behind the ocean. It's a complete baloney. It's a kindergarten level of strategic planning. Well, I shouldn't say that, because in my last book, I quote my good acquaintance, Mr. Alexander Rogers, outstanding Russian economist and a very good, humorous guy. He correctly stated, United States doesn't do strategy, it does business plans. That's it. Fact is, when you look at, you know what, learning Clausewitz or Sun Tzu doesn't make you a strategist, okay? So being a very good military professional who understands the resources, that's totally different story. And as a result, today, what we see, as I already stated, it is basically all these, indirect strategies, all these conflagrations, all this firing up, all kinds of the conflicts, sowing the chaos, because this is the only thing they know. But again, the countermeasures to this have been developed, and the new generation of weapons. We're talking about actually in Russia, second generation of hypersonic weapons. You do not need nuclear weapon now to completely, basically decapitate any kind of the command and control structure of NATO, no matter what they do, considering the fact that air defenses and those anti-missile defenses primarily very expensive toys. They do not work. And so we have this balance of power, which is absolutely new. This is obviously a multipolar world where United States will remain just another great power, period. Europe is done. It's over because United States needs to eat too. And listen, me as an American citizen, I would say, yeah, I want to eat. I don't care what happens to France or to Germany. I live in the United States. I want this country to prosper. And, so if it takes to, sacrifice Europe in the present socio-economic framework, well, so be it, So, but Europeans richly deserved it anyway. So, and when we look at this basically new balance of power, these are the last accords, so to speak, of this tune, which the combined West was playing for the last 500 years. United States will remain as a great power. Europe will not. It's a gone.
Yes, indeed. Andre, I know you only have a couple minutes. I was going to ask you if you believed that the Oreshnik and Russia's military advancements were the highlight of, because I'm going to ask all my guests what the highlight geopolitically was of 2024, in case I don't see you again. I don't know if you have any different answer.
No, it's not. No, Oreshnik was merely the other demonstration of the intermediate range missile. If you put it in Chukotka in the far east of Russia, it actually can cover pretty much 40% of U.S. territory, all Western United States. So, and it suddenly becomes not intermediate range, but by default, not really intercontinental. It doesn't have intercontinental range. But no, I would say that the highlight was Kursk. That's the highlight. Many people do not understand, cannot grasp the scale of what happened there. The best forces, everything they can throw in was thrown in, and that was completely annihilated. When you look attentively right now, they are holding on, as I already stated, by 80 square kilometers, grabbing to some territory just for their PR reasons. When you look at the state of their forces, it's horrible. It's horrible. The wounds are horrible. They cannot evacuate anybody. 36,000, probably today is more. KIAs alone, so that means what? Another 30,000 maimed and sanitary losses. Whole large combined army has been lost there. People have to literally wrap it out. It went in on 6th of August. Now it's gone. It's not there. And this is the best they had. The last thing which is happening for the last couple of days, I know they've been throwing in the last remaining Leopards 2, Abrams and all that, but their fate will be really bad. So, and that's the highlight. Oreshnik is just another organic development of the, high precision, standoff weaponry. So wait until you see the rest of it. And believe me, that will be a shocker. In fact, this is not even what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the new iteration of the S-500, which is going to be coming out fairly soon. And that thing is a monster. So.
Well, Andre, I know you have another appointment. Scott and I will stick around. Everyone go to the video description after this stream, and you can find Andre Martinov's blog.
Go figure. Follow me.